Thanks, everybody. Just wish you all a good morning.
Good morning, Senator.
I declare open this 27th and final hearing in the Senate Select Committee on Job Security. I'd like to acknowledge the Ngunnawal people, the traditional custodians of the land we are meeting on today, and pay my respects to all elders past, present and emerging. My name is Senator Tony Sheldon. I am Chair of the committee and I'm joined by Deputy Chair Senator Matt Canavan, Senator Ben Small and Senator Karen Grogan by teleconference. This is a public hearing and a Hansard transcript of the proceedings is being made. Today's hearing is also streaming live via the web and that can be found at www.aph.gov.au. Whilst the committee has tabled its report in relation to the original terms of reference, we have been granted a short extension of time for the limited purpose of inquiring into possible privileged matters, including to A, investigate allegations raised in relation to the treatment of seasonal workers who gave evidence at the committee's public hearing on the 2nd of February 2022, B, to ascertain the facts in the matter, and C, report any findings to the Senate. These are matters that the committee takes very seriously as part of this inquiry. The committee has received written correspondence from relevant parties. In addition, today's hearing will allow the committee to ask questions of the seasonal worker witnesses and related parties. I remind all witnesses that in giving evidence to the committee, they are protected by parliamentary privilege. It is unlawful for anyone to threaten or disadvantage a witness on account of evidence given to a committee, and such action may be treated by the Senate as a contempt. It is also a contempt to give false or misleading evidence to a committee. If a witness objects to answering a question, the witness should state the ground upon which the objection is taken, and the committee will determine whether it will assist on an answer, having regard to that ground which is claimed. If the committee determines to insist on an answer, a witness may request that the answer be given in camera. Such a request may, of course, also be made at any other time. The committee is due to present its final report no later than the 30th of March 2022. Where a witness takes questions on notice, answers should be provided by midday, Friday the 17th of March 2022, to ensure they are received before tabling. I remind all participants and committee members to ensure that their mobile phones are turned off or switched to silent, and that you remember to mute when you are not speaking and giving evidence. I now welcome Ms. Dana Levitt, Ms. Lieta Solomon Dulgan, and seasonal workers from Samoa, and thank you for your time today. For this session, the workers will be assisted by a Samoan interpreter, Fia, by video conference. The committee thanks you all for joining us today and for your time and efforts in getting here in person. For the Hansard record, will you please state your names and the capacity in which you appear today? The workers may simply state their first names.
My name is Alec.
Thank you.
I am Lieta Saulumadagan.
Thank you.
I am Talipope Kalolo.
Thank you.
I'm Dana Levitt, solicitor for the seasonal workers.
Good, thank you. You've been provided with information on parliamentary privilege, the protection of witnesses and giving evidence to parliamentary committees. I understand the Secretariat has spoken with you about this. As mentioned in my opening remarks, in giving evidence to the committee today, you're protected by parliamentary privilege. However, it is also important to note that parliamentary privilege applies only in Australia. Parliamentary privilege is a special right that means that you cannot be prosecuted or disadvantaged because of anything you have provided in evidence that has been accepted by the committee or because you gave this evidence. However, because this privilege only applies within Australia, a person will not be protected by parliamentary privilege outside of Australia. In other words, you are protected by privilege for things you say in Australia, but you're not protected by privilege when you return to your home country. This hearing is being broadcast live and a transcript is being made. To reduce any potential risks to the workers, the committee has agreed to use workers' first names only. I now invite each of you to give an opening statement, perhaps starting with the workers. At the conclusion of your remarks, I will invite members of the committee to ask questions. Maybe starting with you, Lecky, if you would like to make any opening statement. If you don't, that's fine as well, but if you'd like to make an opening statement briefly.
Sorry, Senator, can I just ask, is this I understand there is a Samoan language interpreter. Is that person starting her duty now, or do you want me to assist?
Yeah, she's on the screen now.
Okay,
Yes.
oh, good, all right.
Ms. Fia, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Good, thank you.
Can you hear me?
I can, very loud and clear. Thank you very much. So I'm just asking Aleki if he'd like to give an opening speech. If not, he's welcome to pass on to Tally Pope.
Aleki o ngau abakule abango e whai ai sautala.
Ia, whaftai mo lewa noa. Ia, o le awala o mai o le mnau mi o se sosoani.
Thank you for the chance. The reason why I'm here, I need help.
I tūlanga la le I mea tau kon karate o loo mato umia.
This is in relates to the contract that we have.
I le lava leo le maamlama ma le wha maamlama ina le ai o stangata na whalili ual mako kon karate.
We do not have all the knowledge and understanding. It relates to the contract because there was nobody to explain to us what the contract is all about.
Ia, ngau mai ai mākou ia mwhai mai a saingi ia mato e whao tia I lātou ia pero tūlanga la leo le mo mie mātou se sosoani.
We were told to sign and then give it back to them, and that's why we need help.
Ia mara tele au tūlanga ro tupune tono matou whatoanga o lo matou ngalua I nei.
There's a lot of things that's happening in where we're working in the farms.
I mea kau deduction ua tele ia deduction ia leo maamlama I mātou pe whawhenga ka kipi ia deduction whapea ma le lava o matou whasoa whamunmole.
There's a lot of deductions that come out of our wages, and we are not clear about these deductions. And we are left with very minimal amount of wages.
Ia pera wala leo lo au ai mai whaftai lava.
That's the reason why I'm here. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that, Aleki. Tally Pope, if he'd like to say something. If not, he's welcome to pass it on to...
Laki, Sally Pope, ia a whape se me te tia talanoa ai, o lo awa non nei.
Ia, whaftai mo lawa noa e mo mono whaftai atu le
For the chance.
sunga le senate ia le ngata lea o tato umolo whapena au wai nei aso nei wha moi moi whaftai fo ile sunga le tamata ilo ia ngata lea o le whafautua ia tina ia lieta a me se fo lea o le mamalu o lato lo tapua ia le nei wha moi moi nei aso.
Thank you so much, everyone who are presenting today. Thank you to each of like the lawyer, Alieta, and everyone else who have come together today.
Ia, o le awala le o mai nei aso ia o le avea lea mamori mau fo ilea ile tūlanga lo ia le wha moi moi pe ona tatia nei.
I am here as a witness.
Ia, o au mai a nisi fuafuanga o lo whangasolo le tatou wha moi manga nei aso. Ia, o lea wau nei o te avea o mamori mau o te langolango ina le wha moi moi pe ona iai e tusai fo ima manaonga pe ona tu inatu iluma.
Whatever that we're going to discuss today, I am here as a witness, and I'm going to say what, I know.
Whaftai mo lam no.
Thank you for the chance.
Ms. Dugan, would you like to say something?
Yep. Thank you for the opportunity. Yes, my name's Lieta Saulumadagan. As I said, I am the volunteer advocate for the Pacific Island seasonal workers in Australia. And I'm here to support and also to hopefully get the chance to ask some of the questions or respond to any questions that will be put at me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Levitt?
I'm okay for opening statements, thank you.
Good, thanks very much. I just want to then just go to the matter of, particularly this, as you're aware, this hearing's to look at primarily at and substantially at the privileges matter, and that means the question of was there and has there been interference with the workers as a result of giving evidence at this inquiry. Fia, I might just let you interpret that as well, if that's okay.
Ia, ua tata ua mai nei aso e a fo e tātou te talatala noa e winga I whapita uli o iai po o a fo I ni mata upu au o mai. Ia o le mafuaaga lana ua alai ona tatou o mai lenei aso e matou te fiafia e talia ia le tau mataupu ia a tatou talatanoa lo iai.
Aleki and Talipope, you gave evidence here previously on Wednesday, the 2nd of February, supported by your colleagues.
Whaamatalaga muamua mai a outou mai le aso lua o Februari a le kima tarapope.
Ia, sa alei.
Supported by your
Yes.
colleagues Eremaya, Conofensi, Elia and Turner. Could you tell us what... Yes.
Ina e isi au vaenga na tau mai o lātou ingoa e le o maau o le lei atu.
Could you tell us what happened after the hearing? Did you lose any shifts? And maybe if I could ask Leke first.
E mawhai ona e tau mai o le ale mena tupu ina ua uma le tātou le whaamasinonga muamua lea po o le a fo ia. Le talanoanga le sa whai muamua le hearing le ua uma. O le ale mena tupu na lusi ni au sifi.
Whamolmole si toi au ntasi malfisiri whamolmole.
Ina ua uma le talanoanga le sa whai muamua.
Ia,
E iai, o le ale aso le sa whai muamua le tau talanoanga muamua.
ia,
Na iai se mea na tupu, na misi ni au sifi, ni au ngaluenga.
ia, whaftai mo le whafsiri. Ina ua mai a le tatanonga mua po le hearing len whai mua la solua o Februari. Ia, matou tuua ina I kempa mo Wapeton I le meolo matou whamautua. Ia, peita I o le mesa iai sa tau fia I matou mingaluenga. E le imwhai on matou tue whaingaluenga ai o le whamoe sa iai. Sa matou nofo lava I le pitanga lo matou nofoi. Ai whaawau pele tongi na I matou. Ona o le whamoe lea se I mautu se whatoanga. E matou te movie ai pe o matou tarsangang tu na atu I le tanonga muamua. I se whatoanga matou te movie ai.
After the 2nd of February, with the discussion that we had here, we went back to where we were living at Robertson, and we were not working. They were planning on moving us to another farm,
O lesi
but we
sui.
still got paid.
Ia, o lesi sui nga faule sa iai ia wa matou atu wa sui le tau o le peace rate o lo alue ia le matou timo lo whainga ruenga pia mwha o wina nga ruenga le matou whatoanga lo matou nga lue ai.
One of the changes that occurred was that there was a change in the costing of the work that we were doing.
Ia, o isi mawhaanga na tutupu I le mai ai o le tatanonga nei le aso lua o Februari. Ia, sa wa aia lava tūlanga la matio I matou e le e se tūlanga sanga le mua e peitai. O le angang whaaftai le tua e le ise sia na whai nei tūlanga le sa matou wa ai ai.
One of the other things that we have noticed, we were threatened. And luckily that no one was injured. But that's one of the things that we have noticed. We felt threatened.
Ia, na matou mana o mia le whaawau pea o le tutulo ino le mata upuni. Ina ia matou maua lava le aunga o le whaamoe le matou te mana o mia. Ina ia matou maua se sao tonga. Masawa wali sao I kampani nei matou te whaafsangai. I tula fono mala uma o le tunune o stari.
We wanted to pursue the hearing like what we are having today to ensure that we have all the rights to go ahead and to ensure that the employer is doing what they are supposed to be doing legally.
Ia, o le tele lava o tustusinga ma whaasalango sa matou maua le mai ai le o le hearing mua. Ia, e le iei lava se tūla na whaapolei nai. E na pau lava le tūna titilo iei o le matou wa afia ai peitai. E ui na tele tustusinga ma tua inga le leifo e whaasanga me I matou. Ai le lava se mentupu, o lo whaapena solo le lava I matou te mini.
After we have received the information after the first hearing, everything was okay. However, we were feeling a bit uncomfortable. But yeah.
Ia, whaaftai mo lewa noa.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. I just want to just so I'm clear, was there shifts originally when you came back on the 3rd of February back to your place of work? Was there shifts that were taken off you that, and you weren't able to return to work until Sunday the 6th of February, is that correct?
O ke fia malama ele kai miling kau fo ia puali
Ia.
aso kolu o Februari. Nga yangi sifi nga ave esea mai a oko. Nga ka keeping kau sifi mai a oko.
Sifi ko nga ringa. Ia, ai ni aso nga misi ko nga ringa ko fo ia ko ingi famsi mo.
Ia, ngā misi le aso ngā so ai mana sko ngā ifkoa mako e kono mako aso ngā misi ai.
We had about 3 days that we missed off working.
Thank you. Did you, prior to leaving to come to Canberra, who did you inform that you were going to be at this hearing?
O ai nga kau fai ai kau ke lei o mai o le kau ke o mai i le afa ia, i le kakangoanga lea.
Ia ol
Sa kau
matou,
ka ueses.
ia ol matou team leader.
We told our team leader.
Lecky, is that your recollection of events?
Laki o lau
Ole mako-
kakongoanga.
Ia ngā umalonga whasokain mako tim dira ia ngā oala le kai mila mako o mai. O le kalangan mako kai kai ia. Ka penga mako mo ke o mai o warwha moe moe o la vo ilang o la kou.
Yes, that's what the team leader was saying. Just get yourself ready and go ahead. We are all supporting you.
Was that team leader Pacifica, and that was on the 30th of January, is that correct, that he was informed?
Ia.
O ai le team leader ngā
O Pacifica.
Pacifica.
I think there's a bit of
Pacifica.
confusion as to which hearing.
Sorry, just want to let interpret the...
Sorry.
Theo, if you could just interpret first.
o ai le team leader ngā lesa kau whai ai.
O Pacifica au awa.
Team leader was Pacifica Auapa was the person that we were talking to.
Ms. Levitt, did you want to...
I think there's a little confusion as to which time around we're talking. So there's the first Senate hearing, where I know when Lieta went to pick up the boys, MADEC employees actually confronted her and tried to intimidate her out of taking the boys to Canberra the first time around. The second time round, I think the team leader and some other islanders have been galvanised and have been supporting the boys, but certainly MADEC hasn't been towing that party line. MADEC has been continuing to intimidate them.
Well, can I just go to this question on the first occasion that this is to Tally Pape and Aleki. On the first occasion that you came to the Senate, did you inform the team leader before you left on the first occasion?
Te koe whai ako ala o whasiri lea a le ki matari pope.
Ia.
Ngā lua ka unga i le team leader po o Pacifica o le alu o mai i le kalkalongoanga ngei.
The first time round. Not this
I le
one.
kaimi mua mua.
Ngā ora kai mua
Le
mua.
kaimi mua mua. Ngā lua ka ua ia Pacifica le team leader o le alu o mai i le kaimi mua mua.
Ia, sa ole le.
Yes, we did.
And who did you inform? And what day, can you recall which day you informed them?
O ai ngā lua ka ua ia ai a o le afo i le aso.
Aso, whiwhine whai le hiwi. So,
Ona ko le sko kasi.
skopas. Ia ole so lua fitu lua valu. Ia, ole aso lua fitu lua valu lua iwa sa matou so tai pe male team leader rea mo le whamotu ina whamoenga le. Malanga atu ia Lieta ma le tina ia poli mai la so tolos formaltas. O mai a leo matou feutanga i ma Pacifica le malanga le la ma mai.
27th, 28th, 29th, those were the days we were talking with Pacifica before Alieta came on the 30th,
31st.
31st.
Thank you, Tally Pape. Lecky, is that your recollection of events? And is there anything you want to add?
Lucky o e sa o ia kalanga.
Ia, sa ole le.
Yes, that's correct.
And Ms. Salaman Dugan, would you be able to tell me that what contact did you have with either MADEC or Sunny Ridge prior to the first trip to Canberra for the Senate?
Okay. On our way down, we were about 20 minutes away from Warburton. But my friend Paulima at the back there and myself flew down on the morning of the 31st, picked up a van from Melbourne Airport, then we drove to Warburton. About 20 minutes away, Aleki and Tali rang me and said, Rob, one of the employees of MADEC, was there questioning them why they're coming to Canberra. So I said to them, can you please talk to him and ask him to leave you there? I'll be there in about 20 minutes. So I even spoke to Rob and told him that we were 20 minutes away, and he agreed to wait around for us. So that was the time that I spoke to Rob, and when we got there, he wasn't there. So they were fully aware that the boys were leaving.
Thank you. This is a question to Ms. Dugan. MADEC has told this committee in writing that on Monday the 31st of January, Sunny Ridge asked MADEC to relocate the workers to another farm by Friday the 4th of February because they were not working properly. MADEC has said this is why the shifts were cut. But based on what you've told us today, Sunny Ridge likely only wrote the letter after they heard the workers were coming to Canberra to talk about their poor pay and conditions. Is that correct?
I would say that's correct.
Aleki and Talipope, have you ever received any formal complaints from MADEC or Sunny Ridge about your performance or behaviour?
Laki ma taripope, mai ai ni whaiki o ngā wakuia o lua e winga I le kou ngaluenga.
Ia ulawa ia le amtanga o le ngaluenga ia sa ia wha se am whaiti o ngā le pasolo wa ia whatoanga ia te au I taimia o avema supervisor.
Yes, when I was a supervisor, there were complaints against me from the boss. And I was the supervisor.
Ia, o le tele o taimia o te kiki lawa ia I le boss le tūlanga le whainga o le matou team.
Most of the time, I go against the, the boss in relates to treating our team.
Ia, o le isi whaitionga sa umeitea. O le complain le lato ngaluenga mfa mai au nei to e complain le lato paula wal mea o le whainga luenga pe tai mulmuli ane wha malolo au mai le tofi supervisor a matai lava le ona o mai tau le tūlanga na le ango mai le titilo mai pe a matofitau.
One of the complaints that was given to me was because I was going against them with what they were telling me. So that leads to me being laid off as a supervisor.
I'm not worried about
that. What I want is justice. Thank you.
Aleki, have you anything? Was there any actions that were formal complaints from MADEC or Sunny Ridge about your performance or behaviour?
Ai oe Aleki e ngi whaiki o ngā wakuia ke oe e winga e lau whainga o ngā duenga.
Ia pau ale whaiki o ngā keleng whaiki o mei ia le pāsia I mākou o le whosinga le o mākou kuleinga o poloka. Mare kele o kainga.
The only complaint that came to us was forcing us for the blocks, pushing the blocks.
So, sorry, Aleki, we continue.
Ia pauanga o le whaiki o ngā waenga o le kamwhai le kulei mākou le kamwhai ia uma polokalanga o ngau iei lākou. Ia marwhai o mea manga o iei lākou le kilingi ma ai lo karwhenga iei mar kulei o mākou kaimikimu a mako malolo ai o kingi iei mākou pe o kulanga ia.
The complaint were, the intention for us to complete the work, clear the work, get the work done. When we had a rest, when it rained, they complained to us.
Thank you. Just my final question before I go to pass on to Senator Canavan. Have you ever missed any shifts other than when you were told that you were have you missed any other shifts other than when you were told by MADEC that you were coming to Canberra?
Ngai ngisi si finga nga fo ya nga misi inga ua ka ua ole a ko mai ingai Canberra.
Ia, sa o lei, sa ia so sa misi ia ule, vai so le ai matu teli malanga mai, ona ole,
Yeah, there were days that were missing before we came.
ia ona sa fa mai mai fo ia, malo sia
Because
le
I was
ngai
sick.
mali.
Sorry, Fia, could you just interpret that again for me? I missed it.
Yes, there were days missing because I was sick.
Thank you. Aleke?
Lucky, Aleki.
Aleke, was there any, have you ever missed any shifts other than when you told Matic, that you were coming to Canberra? So have you missed any shifts other than when you were told?
Ngai nyau si nga misi inga ua e whai la laa e sau Canberra.
Ia nga pawale kai milanga mi se ia u si fiel kai le COVID.
The only
Yeah.
time that I missed the shifts were during the COVID.
I. Nga mi se ia mako aso e se fulu ia e saurisi vai aso wa tapo mai mako fal. Ko kongi uma kai mi mako ngofo e kongole. Hotel.
Yeah, we missed about 10 days because of the COVID, but when we had our wages the following week, they were all paid. We received double.
Ia tapo ko ma kipinga o ka vale. Ia
And
le
then,
fo nga kai mi mako
deductions
ngadua
were-
mako ngof.
And the deductions were doubled as well, but we didn't use the cards when we did not work.
Ia waftai.
Si fa to.
Thank you.
Tala o misi fa mol.
Oh, I have one missing, please.
O lisi tūlanga o ngā le ngai i kai milenga o supervisor mar kai mi wha maroro ia. Ngā wha maroro la o le ko whingala supervisor lili mai lo le boss le i mako team leader.
The boss called me.
E kōrua se mo ki
After the
awha i mo
team
ki le whingaruni.
E fia, koe whainga lau kala e kōru aso ko kere whainga ruenga.
Ia kai min ko a wha maroro o ma supervisor ma le wha makalanga le boss i mako team leader. E mo ki awha so e kōru. Mako offla ia le so e
When I
kōru
was
mako
laid off-
maroro.
Yep, when I was laid off as a supervisor, we were given that we are having a rest for 3 days.
Ia mako koia e kuro ia so long kolu mako koia. Ai wha maroro i lo ma supervisor ia ma wha solo ko lo ko piki le fola au stopper.
When e fia aso ko ngai ko malolo ai e kolu.
Ia e kōrua so mako offla.
Ai ngai koe fo ia kuloa e a fo ia e piki ai koe wha malolo loa oi.
Ia sa o le.
Okay, when we came back, after missing the 3 days, when we came back, then I was laid off, as a supervisor. And then I was given another day off as well.
Ia whaftai.
So, osao.
Ia mai sa o le.
Wa ave ese nga ia male, wa ave ese ia male ko whinga o supervisor.
Sorry, let me repeat myself. After 3 days that we were, not working, then when we resumed back to work, my supervisor role was taken off me after that time, when we returned.
And that's the return from Canberra, is
Inga
another
ufo ina
occasion?
imaken.
No, that was return from the time, they were given 3 days off as a punishment as a result of Aleki complaining as a supervisor. They rang them after work and said, you're off work for 3 days. And when they returned, they said, Aleki, Talipope, you're no longer a supervisor. So 3 days were given as a punishment for the whole team, and Talipope was punished by taking the supervisor role off him.
Fia, would you mind interpreting that to Telepipe, because Telepipe will need to respond whether that's correct or not?
Telepope, o le kala akieta.
Ia,
Ngā fo ia, ko koe fo ia kulo ia so kolu ia sa wha amalolo ai oko.
ia,
Ane ngā kusa wa whaasala oe, wa whaasala oe o le meanga wa lenga ane ese lau wa fo ia, lau kūlanga ngā iari o le supervisor ko kanga wa aia ngā luenga.
ia, sa o le.
Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you very much for your time, and I'll now go to Senator Canavan.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you, Chair. I have some questions about the payslip that was tabled at the last hearing.
E ai la o fasili e winga I peisilipi.
Ia.
At the last hearing, Senator Grogan asked Telepo, and I'm quoting, so we're looking at a 64-hour work week, and after all of the numerous deductions, you end up with $100. Is that correct? Telepope, you responded by saying that's correct.
I lea fo ia, I le kakaukalangoanga le sa whai mua mua.
Ia.
Sa au mai ai kokongu ia le kokongi lea po le peisilipi.
Ia.
Ma kilo na ia I momo o mea ia kakipi.
Ia.
Ia ngā kokoe, inga ua umang kakipi uma mea ia. Ai kokoe mai se lau ka la, e sao.
Ia, sa lelei.
Did
Yes,
you
that's correct.
work a 64-hour week for the period from 11th of November until the 17th of November?
Nga e whainga luenga mai I le aso se fulu pasi o November. E o I le aso se fulu fiku o November. Wa o lo peisi lipi sa iaiku la e ongo se fulu malwha e whainga luenga ai. Nga e whainga luenga mai le kaiminga.
Ia, sa lelei.
Yes, I was working between the 11th and the 17th of November.
My specific question is, did you work a 64-hour week during
Nga e whainga luenga I ku la e ongo se fulu wha. O la ufasili nga ongo se fulu wha I ku la. Nga e whainga luenga ai.
Ia, o le time sheet le sa atu luma le aso le, o le hearing mua mua. Le sa mau mai taimi le sa o whainga duengai.
Yes, the payslip that was presented in the first hearing that stated all the hours and time that I worked.
Sorry, Senator, not the payslip, it was a timesheet.
The
Well,
time-
sorry, I mean, I'm directing my questions to Telepo here. Yeah, and I wanted to ask that. The pay slip seems to indicate you only worked 19.75 hours that week. Is that correct? Is the pay slip correct?
Canavan, did you say 19.5?
7.5, sorry, 7.5.
19.75.
Yes.
O le paisilipi le sa amai o la saka ua ai e se fulu iwa kesi ma le fiku lima I kulanga I whaingaruenga ai. E sa o a telepoke.
Ia, sa lelei o le vai taimi le au supervisor.
Yes, that's correct when I was a supervisor.
Okay, so I am confused. Did you work 64 hours for the week of the 11th of November to the 17th of November?
Ua kaungumi I le kamai mea lea. O la fasili ake oe. Nga e whainga luenga I ku la e ongo se fulu ma le wha I le va o le se fulu kasi o November. A nga I le se fulu fiku o November.
It's definitely more than 19.75 though. So
Well, the payslip clearly says 19.75, or that's the times by a rate.
O le
How many
paisilipi
hours
ai
did
a
you
ngai
work?
ka umai e se fulu iwa kesi ma le fiku lima I ai kulanga I whainga luenga ai a fasili. Nga e whainga luenga le ongo se fulu whai kula.
A whamulmuli si tu mea sa taimi le whamulmuli.
Please, I just need some time.
Okay.
Just while we're having that, right, some time, the witness is okay if we have, if a photographer takes a photo?
Yes,
Is it,
it's definitely,
for,
Yep.
for the newspaper, yeah.
definitely more than 19 hours, according to the timesheets.
Can Telepope tell us what, in answer to Senator Canavan's question, can Telepope tell us what the timesheet said?
Nga e kali mai fasili a caravan. A canavan. Al sengati.
He'll need to add them.
Telepope e mawhaionga e kali I le fasili a le senati.
So we need to calculate how many hours. This day,
what dates?
8th
To the what?
8th to the 17th.
Well, if all of you, if can I just ask, are you, all you're doing there in Canberra, you just having
4,
timesheets that we
5,
look
6, 7 days. Okay, So we need to calculate how many hours there.
Canavan, can you repeat yourself, please?
Can I just ask, is all you're doing at the moment simply adding up the hours that were on the timesheet tabled at the hearing?
Sorry, he's got
Why-
recorded here.
O alu ke koma whai e a whai a wha popoi kūranga i kongo o le timesheet.
Yeah, yeah, we're working on it.
Senator
because
Senator
he's-
Canavan, it may be of assistance if
Yeah, 'cause
Leota
he's
at least...
recorded that-
Sorry,
Sorry,
Leota, could you
sorry.
just hold for a moment?
Okay, thanks.
Senator Canavan, if you're comfortable with this, Ms Dugan might just be able to give you an outline of what they're doing, and then it's up to Mr Talipape to answer the question, not anyone else. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. And I just to clarify, though, I have some questions about that timesheet. So perhaps if that's all you're doing, I could go into those questions.
Yep.
'Cause I
Ole,
have those timesheets, obviously.
I think they're still doing the calculation on the timesheet first, and maybe if they give you that baseline, then they'll give you some, but with the assistance of your questioning that's coming up.
Although I can do that. I can calculate that. I've got them
Sorry,
in front of me.
Senator, all he's got here are the time he started and the time he finished, so we...
And that's the document that was tabled at the last hearing? Is that what
Yeah,
you're
I
reading?
can work on this while
Yeah,
sorting.
and that's
Yep.
that's a document that was tabled
Yep.
last hearing.
Thanks,
Yeah.
sorry, Senator.
Well, I've got some questions on that.
Thanks.
Hey,
Thanks.
Dr.
Back to
Tilly.
you, Senator.
So just turning to the timesheet, the timesheets that were tabled at the last hearing indicate that you worked on the 12th, 13th, 14th and 17th of November. Did you work on those days?
Canavan, what are your days again? Sorry, I missed the date.
12th, 13th, 14th and 17th.
12, 13,
14th and 17th of November.
and 17. I lunga le timesheet po le pepa le wha mau ai i a kaiminga e whainga duenga ai. Pali pope.
Ia.
Ma e whainga duenga i le aso se fulu lua, aso se fulu kolu, aso se fulu wha, ma le aso se fulu fiku.
Ia, sa o lili.
Yes, I did.
Maidec have written to us saying that they have no record of you working on those days. But are you confident you did work on those days?
O lea e ka umai e le po o kampangi le whainga duenga ai.
Ia.
E le o iai ni wha mau maunganga e whainga duenga i aso ia. Ai sa e whainga duenga i aso.
Aso a fo ile nga ka ua mai whamon mon.
What are the days again? Let me repeat myself.
12th, 13th, 14th and 17th of November.
12, 13, se full, sorry, se full lua, se full kolu, se full wha, se full piku. O aso ia. Nga e whainga luenga i aso ia.
Ia, sa o lili.
Yes, I was.
Do you know where these timesheets came from? Did
Ma e
you?
roi nga ko whenga mai ai
Sorry.
le te pale wha mau mau ai ia. Le nga mai ai le kaimi le ngai ai ngi. Le nga mai. Whenga mai ai. Le timesheet. Le te pale wha mau mau ai kaimi whainga luenga.
Ia, o le pepa sa au mai le iuni.
This was from the union.
Okay. So did you assist the union in writing or in formulating these timesheets, creating these? timesheets, I should say?
Nga e whesosoangi le yungi i le whainga le timesheet lea.
Sa pau lava le mea sa whai le iuni, tuwha mai o pepa ia o mātou e whaatum. Tai mia sa whainga
The
mai.
only thing that the union was doing was giving papers to us, and it's for us to complete.
Okay. When did you complete these timesheets?
O nga whiala ngai whakumua ai le timesheet i lea po le pepa lea.
O le vai aso lava le sa au mai le time sheet lea. Sa whianga ilo ma le whainga ruenga whaatum.
The same week that we received these papers, and then I was working and I completed it.
I was just clarifying that you completed it in the same week you worked those hours. Is that correct?
O le kaimia lea lenga e whainga luenga ai, o le kaimi whainga e whakumua ai, ia le pepa lea, le timesheet.
Ia, sa o lili.
Yes, that's correct.
Does anyone here? This is a question for anyone. Does anyone here? Did anyone here know or themselves provide these timesheets to Senator Grogan, any other senator, or any other senator's staff in offices to be tabled at the last hearing?
Ngai ai se si o kopo ai lava le I ngā kango ave se a fo I rangi peisi lipi po ngi time sheets po ngi pepa I sesi o le senate.
Whamulmuli si toi awuna male fesiri whamulmuli.
O le fesili mo o sesi a o koe I ngai ai sesi o konga ave se peisi lipi sesi a o le senate I.
Pesiri
time-
po le timesheet.
Le time sheet.
Ia, sa o le.
E ngai ai sesi o konga nga ave se pepa I sesi I.
Ia, o le timesheet lea sa ave le hearing le na umat. Aso lua Februari.
Yes, the timesheet that we're talking about was given in the last hearing.
So that's a yes that you did provide those timesheets to a senator or Senator Grogan or any staff in a senator's office.
O kusala o laukali I nga avenga le timesheet lea I what was the name, Kenwen?
Senator Grogan or any other senator.
Po sesi fo ia se kangaka o se natele I po sesi lava.
Ia, sa o le.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Moving on to some other questions. MADAC has written to us saying that that some workers at Sunny Ridge requested to be relocated. Did you request, or anyone here at Telepope or Aleki, did you request to be relocated from Sunny Ridge Farms?
Sa makau maua mai se kusi mai o I kampangia ko whainga luenga ai ua avaku se manga onga e afo ia e ko ke fia o inisi whakoanga, inisi mea e iai e sao.
Ia, sa o le.
Yes, that's correct.
Was that request made before the hearings in February?
O le kou manga onga langa sa ave aile I whaia le afo ia, le kalangoanga mua ka kou le nga whai I a Februari.
Le ai. Na mai ale tanuanga mo mole ia Februari ia whatoa. Avel mana onga le.
The request was given after we already had a discussion here in February.
Te whaasala utala o le aso le sa whaitanuanga le sa avel mana onga le. Mo le fsuia ina o le matu whatoanga.
Let me correct what I was saying. It was the day that we had the hearing that we did put in the request.
Okay. Was it before or after the hearing?
Inga ua uma le kalangoanga.
Ia.
Le aile I whaia kalangoanga.
Ile o male tanuanga. A le taimel tanuanga le sa avel mana onga le. Whamulmuli.
After the hearing, and then we put in a request.
Okay. Who did you make that request to?
O ai sa ave el mga onga lea.
O le matou mana onga sa whaalia tu lumo senate. Ia a o le taimi nei o lo whiutanga ia le matou whawhautua ma le kampani o lo whapeona matou whainga luengai.
Our request was given to the Senate.
Okay. So no one alerted MADEC, Sunny Ridge, or anyone to pass on that message to them that you wanted to be relocated?
Ele I avea o kou o kampangia kou whainga luenga kou ke manga o kou ke o nisi mea.
Le
Ele
ai.
te si o kou whai I kampangia.
Ele se o matou na whsotai ai. Ai o matou
Noi.
tinga ina lava le whatoanga lo matou iei le na leo na ilmana onga le e sui se matou whatoanga.
No, we didn't, alert any of them. It was just because we were treated very, like we've been working so hard. We felt that we've been pushed too hard on the work that we were doing. And that's how we felt that we wanted to be relocated.
This question is to anyone. Just to be specific, what MADEC has submitted to the Senate is that a HR manager, a manager at Sunny Ridge Farms, advised that they had been approached by Samoan team leaders who stated that 6 workers did not want to be at Sunny Ridge anymore. Does anyone here know whether that request was made. And I should say that request was made on the 31st of January before the hearings. Does anyone know here whether that request by Samoan team leaders was made of Sunny Ridge to Sunny Ridge?
Ms Dugan, I think you're indicating.
Yes, thank you. The request was made on the 11th of February, way after our hearing here. What happened, one of the workers from Choice Seedlings contacted me with a complaint about Madik. And in this conversation, my husband was driving and I was talking in the car on the way up to Sydney on the 11th. We did have a family affair in Sydney. And this worker said, our farmer is an excellent lady who looks after us like her own children. However, I've got a complaint about Madik. So in the conversation, I found out that these farmers are great people. And about 10 minutes later, the husband of Jermaine, who is Jeff, walked in while we were still talking. So I spoke then to Jeff about the possibility of having workers, 6 workers from Warburton, and he said he was looking and he's very happy to take the 6 workers from Warburton. At that time, after the hearing, I spoke to David because he spoke to me about the possibility of relocating the 6 boys, and I asked David a favour if he could relocate them to a farm nearby Canberra, so that I'll still be able to help the boys with their language barrier. And David said he will try his best. He said to me that he doesn't have any farms close to Canberra, but he'll try his best. There are some around New South Wales. And that's why when I found out about this farm in Camden, I contacted David on the 11th and on the 12th. And I said to David, there is a farmer who's looking for work and he's very happy, both him and his wife are very happy to bring the workers from Warburton. But it was definitely not before the hearing. This was the 11th and the 12th.
That, of course, 2 things can be true at the same time. I specifically just wanted to go to here that the correspondence we have from, I think, Madik, or from a Mr. Robert Hay.
Melo ke whikalangoa koe, o ke whikalangoa koe I whamakalanga po o mea I o correspondence po o kusi po o mea inga mai I kampangi ia.
Mr. Robert Hay, sorry, Mr. Robert Hay has said in writing that he went to talk to 5 Samoan workers, including yourself, including Tally Pope and Aleki, on Sunday, the January the 30th. Can you remember, to specifically to speak about complaints, do you remember Mr. Robert Hay talking to you on Sunday, January the 30th?
Did you say January the 30th?
Yes, January the 30th.
Aleki matali pope.
Yeah.
O lua nganga kua sa kalangoa aku I o Robert Hay ia o kou I le aso kolu se fulu o Februari.
January.
Sorry. Le aso kolu se fulu o Januari. Aleki matali pope.
Ila se kursi fulu in wali ai makele I o ako e mai o lua. Na kou kalangoa I maro.
So korsulu yang wali.
Aso na kou na o ako
Oh, yeah.
fua.
Yeah, Sauli.
Yes, that's correct.
Mr. Robert Hay says again in writing that he asked you or asked any of the workers whether they were unhappy or whether they want to take legal action against the accommodation provider. He says you said, or workers said, that they were not doing anything like that. Is that correct? Is that a correct of your conversation?
Ole kusi lenga amai o ia Robert, le ka ua mai ai, sa kou kalangoi le aso lea, ma fesili aku ai. Pe iai sesio o kou ele o fia I o le mea le kou ke ngofo ai. O le sifo I fesili ngwhai aku, pe iai sesio o kou, o le ako o e whaise kou wafo ia se kou wha amasingonga, e winga I le kulanga I ngaduenga ma mea le kou ke ngofo ai. Ai whai mai le kali, le ai ele ai sesio e alu e whai ngā mea. E sa ole kali lea, le kala lea.
Ya, faftai mal fafsiri. Ole tulanga na le fsiri mai le senati. Ia, o le taimina e sa o sa matau tala noa. E pau lava le
Yes,
tūlanga le.
that's correct. We were talking.
Ai, e mātou te le imala malama le au mainga e rapor fesiri lea. Ai, pau lava le mele ngā le yesa. Ma le no, ia, ai mātou te le imala malama le atoa ngā le au mainga le.
We didn't understand his question, and all we know was to respond, but we didn't understand.
Okay. Mr. Hay also said that he asked whether you were unhappy, and he was told that you had asked your team leader, Pasifika Awabatualagi, to ask Peter, the farm manager, if they could move to a different farm. Did you tell Mr. Hay that you'd asked your team leader to move you to a different farm?
Sa fasili ia hei ia ke oe po ua e unhappy, ai ka ua mai whapeanga e whai ia Pasifika e ke mga au e ke anu i sesi whakoanga e sao.
Se iko au ngā malfe siri po ai le.
Rob.
Yeah, he's familiar with the name Rob, not Hay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, ngā kokanga ma Rob.
Ia,
Ngā fasili Rob, po e pe e ke le o fia i o le mea lai ke iai. Ai o le kali ua umanga whai a Pasifika e koe e ave o ia oe i sesi whakoanga e sao.
le ai, ele iei se whutainga whapea.
No, I am not aware of any of that.
Okay.
There was no discussion.
So just to clarify, you did not tell Rob that you wanted to be moved to another farm?
E afo ia, koe whaamangingoa, ko e ke lei haila ia Rob, e ke anu i sesi whakoanga e sao.
Le ai, ele iei se tara whapea.
No, I didn't.
Can I ask, did anyone, this is a question for anyone, did anyone here today, has anyone referred the allegations of punishment as a result of the evidence provided here? Has anyone passed those allegations on to the Fair Work Ombudsman or the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade and or the Department of Employment?
Ngai ei sesi o le fasiri le whiwhai aku. Ngai ei a sesi o kou lei I sa kou avenga I angia fo ia. Ia whai ki onga ngai I le Fair Work Ombudsman po o le officer o le, did you say the, is it Home Affairs?
Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade or Department of Employment?
O le officer leo le Foreign Affairs Trade o whakaua inga. What was the last one, Kevin? Sorry.
Sorry, Department of Employment.
Po o le po na kanga luenga o ngā luenga. Ngai ei sesi o kou lei I sa avea le maka upu lea. Po se whasea lea I officer ye koru o le malo.
Yeah, thank you. I have made contact with Foreign Affairs. Initially, because I never had a contact with Foreign Affairs before, so I sent some questions to Dave Kuzna, Managing Director of MADIC, asking him to pass the questions over to Foreign Affairs. However, I was told by Kath Cave, Director of Connectivity Division in DFAT, that they were to communicate with the High Commissioner and the team from Samoa, because I wasn't an official member of the team from Samoa. So therefore, we didn't communicate. But after the meeting on Thursday the 3rd, where I was invited eventually to interpret and advocate for the workers, while I was there in my role, particularly as an interpreter. After that meeting, I sent an email to Kath and George Craig and copying several other members of the team. I explained a lot of things and also submitted 2 stories of complaint. One was a story of hope, the other one was Aleki's experience as a supervisor in Warburton. Since then, I've now been contacted by Kath, the director, asking me to send those forms, but I forgot to attach them. So now I'm having contact with Foreign Affairs, and I'm now feeding stories about the employers I've got lots and lots of stories. I'm now starting to feed them through to Kath because she is now asking for it.
Okay. So just to be clear, have you provided any evidence to, I think you mentioned the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade to date?
Last night, yes. It was MEDIC tried to make these workers that were relocated yesterday, they made them to sign some contract and letter of offer and an extension of meal. That title of the letter was even misleading. And they were trying to get these boys to sign that without them understanding. And these 6 boys have already signed an authority for me to act as their advocate and as their interpreter. But I was refused yesterday. Eventually, David sent me the letter last night. Dana was there, we had a meeting last night, and I specifically told this lady by the name of Andre not to get the boys to sign that form, the contract or whatever form she had, because they don't understand. What she did, she still got them to sign, and then David Kuzna sent them to me last night. Well, I've responded to David Kuzna, copying Foreign Affairs as well. I do not, at this stage, I don't have a contact for Fair Work Ombudsman, but I intend to include them as well.
Is there any reason why it's taken until last night to pass these allegations on to the appropriate government officials when we've had allegations of this nature to the Senate for weeks now? Why has it taken so long?
Well, like I said, I did not have a contact for Foreign Affairs. And when I managed to get one, I wasn't allowed to talk because I'm not an official member of the team from Samoa. So I sent another email to Kath following that meeting we had on the 3rd of February, 3rd of March. And I said to Kath that I am writing to her as an Australian Samoan who lives here and has been approached by many, many Pacific Islander workers from Tasmania to Northern Territory to help them out. And Kath then now has asked me to send those stories to her. So I did not have contact with Foreign Affairs.
Can I ask, are any of the workers here today involved in legal action against a labour hire firm or a farm employer of any kind?
Dana here is the lawyer for every Pacific Island seasonal worker in Australia at the moment.
There's no action on foot. There's no action on foot at the moment.
No, not actually.
Is there any preparation for action?
There may be.
What does that mean?
It means I'm compiling evidence to ascertain the strength of a case against labour hire companies, MEDAC being one of them.
Okay. So I asked you last time, Steph, your role. Since look, you're on your LinkedIn profile, you're a director of a class.
I
class
do.
action
Yep,
relations
that's true.
agency. Can you just explain to me what that firm does?
Sure.
What you're involved in?
Class PR is a business that generates awareness for class actions and also enables people to get access to justice where they mightn't be able to otherwise. So what I do is I speak to people like these people here who, without a lawyer, are just getting absolutely exploited to the highest degree, right? So what I do is I listen, I read the news, I see what's going on out in the world, and I pick up on things that people might need help with. The Pacific Labour Scheme obviously being one that jumped out at me because, as we've all heard, there's been 12 reports that have been tabled on the matter and nothing's been done. So it's certainly an issue that I think has some legs and needs to be aired, and that's what I do. So I generate awareness and I create a mechanism whereby people can contact and get access to lawyers.
I'm not a lawyer, but what does public relations for class actions? What does that mean? What do you do?
Well, a class action needs group members, right? So a class action is an action with 7 or more people who have a shared grievance against a company or an entity or a person, right? So the idea is that you need group members to know that there's an action on foot so that they can then avail themselves of the help and assistance that I would then provide for them. So in this particular instance, Class PR, and you would have seen on the Class PR website, has built a page that is translated into every language of the Pacific Islands, almost, the major ones at the moment anyway. And it gives people an opportunity to understand that there is help out there, and there is a mechanism through which not only the Pacific Labour Facility, which might I add I've been referring a lot of people to, but there's extra governmental help out there as well.
Were you at all involved in the creation of the timesheets that were tabled in the Senate?
Absolutely not. I met the boys the same day that you did.
Were you aware of the timesheets before they were tabled?
No.
Okay. Just returning to the potential for legal action, I have an article here on the ABC News website titled Pacific National Working on Queensland Farms claim they're barely making enough money to survive. It was published on the 1st of February, just the day before, I think. In that article, there is a Mr. Levitt quoted as saying, or as I should say, he's paraphrased the article saying that Mr. Levitt believes there are grounds for a class action against some of Australia's biggest labour hire firms. Are you related to Mr. Levitt?
Yes, he happens to be my father.
Okay. And so are you doing work on this particular, are you working on this particular class action that is raised here?
I'm obviously very interested in this issue and airing the issue and ensuring that labour hire companies are held to account for the exploitation of seasonal workers. Yes, absolutely.
Are you doing work on the potential legal action that Mr.
Absolutely.
Levitt-
This is all evidence.
So when you said to me maybe before, when I asked whether you're involved in illegal action,
It's not filed. There's nothing formal that's
I don't
happened.
think that didn't seem to be a particularly fulsome answer, Ms. Levitt. I mean, I'll just ask again, what are you involved in?
I'm involved in
legal
exploring the
action?
opportunity and the prospects of bringing a successful action against Maydeck and other labour hire companies.
Okay, well,
No such
I'll
action's
finish
been
here.
commenced yet, though.
I'll finish here because what I'm concerned about here is there seems to be an attempt to abuse Senate processes for outside legal action because you're a public relations person, and I have no problem with that. You've got a job to do, you've got a crust to earn, but seeking to abuse the Senate and apparently there's been information he tabled that probably was misleading by Senator Grogan at the very least.
Sorry,
This
which
seems to be
information was
great
misleading?
abuse. Sorry, I'll just finish. This seems to be a great abuse of the Senate's time, and I do believe this needs further investigation. We'll obviously hear more evidence later from Sunny Ridge and Maydeck, but I'm very, very worried about how this seems to be a conspiracy here to help and assist an outside legal action.
If I may respond now, what I would say in response is Lietta contacted me as an advocate because she saw that there was some interest in bringing an action against labour hire companies, right? And you don't have to be it's just so obvious that there's a major issue here, right? So as a lawyer, I have every right to speak to people in the community, and Lietta approached me. I brought with me, I had already met Jeff and Jane Smith, but these boys, the 6 people that came from Canberra, I'd never ever met before. No. I didn't even have access, I'd never seen a single document. In fact, Senator Tony Sheldon's aide met the boys with me at the very same time that
I completely agree there's a big issue.
I had no part in doctoring these sheets.
That is no excuse for seemingly the misinformation that's been provided to the Australian Parliament through the Senate to apparently assist a private legal action outside. I'm very concerned about this process because this potentially undermines the integrity of all Senate inquiries if they are abused in this way. Thank you, Chair.
And again, I'd like to respond by saying that I was approached by the Senate to bring witnesses here. I in no way made that happen, put it that way. So I'm assisting the Senate in making these inquiries. I'm in no way impeding the process. In fact, without me bringing all these witnesses here, this wouldn't have been taking place, and this is a very important issue that needs to be aired.
Now,
So I'm assisting the Senate. I'm in no way abusing the Senate committee hearing process.
I now ask Senator Grogan to ask some questions, and quite rightly, when we have these companies in front of us, we'll be able to investigate these matters further, and then we'll be able to start making a decision as a committee whether there's what conclusions we come to. But I'm also very mindful there's been well over a dozen reports of exploitation of migrant workers over a considerable period of time.
Absolutely.
Now to Senator Grogan.
Thank you, Chair. I will just first say that I think it's outrageous for Senator Canavan to say that I've misled the Senate without getting to the bottom of where the documents came from.
Just to be absolutely clear, I did not say that, Senator Grogan. I did not say that. I said the information provided was misleading. I did not say that you did that. So please don't verbal me.
Leah, if I can just ask you a quick question. You've been working with Aleki and Talapope as an interpreter and as an advocate since the last hearing. Is that correct?
Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Dugan, yeah.
Yes, that's correct. I was here, last time I was here as an interpreter, yes.
Have you heard anyone else mention issues that made it about this taking action against these workers? So the issues that have been raised. Have you heard anyone else speak of it?
Anyone else from?
Anyone else at all?
You mean, are you talking about the workers? The workers that I'm...
No, anyone talking of it. So there was reference to the Northern High Commissioner. I wonder if there was, you could talk us through what commentary was made there.
All right. Well, on the 16th of February, I heard a radio interview where the High Commissioner was interviewed by the host, and she was talking a lot. Most of that conversation was about what we did here in Parliament, that she wasn't aware of that, and she also wished that I came to her to talk about this.
Okay. Was there anything else said about the role of the Commissioner and the Commission in the issues that have been raised about the workers, in advocating for them?
Yeah, the High Commissioner was speaking about her role at the government level. My role, which I haven't actually contacted or communicated with any of the government representatives, because my job I'm doing now, as a volunteer, mind you, is as an Australian. I have absolutely complete respect on the High Commissioner and the role that they do play between the government of Australia and the government of Samoa. I'm standing here as an Australian who I have every right to ask questions if I don't understand, but when all these seasonal workers coming to me, even the ones not from Samoa, I've had Vanuatu's, and last night I spoke to some other Vanuatuan people from Queensland, they're asking me for help. So the role of the High Commissioner is totally different from my role I'm playing now as an interpreter and an advocate for the workers.
I guess I'm just asking because you heard the interview, I did not. So just what the relevant elements of that might be in terms of the case, the situation we see with the 6 workers who were allegedly stood down.
Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't hear part of the interview, but the part of the interview I heard that really concerned me was in relation to the workers returning to Warburton from Canberra. That if it wasn't for the liaison officer, the employment would have been terminated and sent back home. I immediately wrote an email to David Kuzna asking him if he had any intention to do that. And he did not respond to me. So by about, I think it was around 6:00 p.m. that same day, I rang David. He did answer the call, and I asked him in person. I asked him over the phone if he had any intention of doing that, and he furiously refused to accept that. And I asked him, can you please respond to me in writing? And he said, no, I'm not responding to you in writing, but I'll respond to you through the hearing. So he still hasn't responded to me in writing.
But you're saying that the High Commissioner had said that a liaison officer from the High Commission had
Yes,
intervened to
that's
stop them
what I
making
heard
that?
over the phone, and a lot of our community members who actually heard that interview all said the same thing as well. The High Commissioner stated that if it wasn't for the liaison officer from Samoa named Aufai Sia, who apparently contacted MADEC and saved the boys from having their contract terminated. So that was said on the radio.
Okay, thank you. That clears that up. Thank you very much. Can I now ask Aleki Taupopi if when you arrived in Australia, whether MADEC arranged a briefing for you with the Fair Work Ombudsman and the union regarding your workplace rights?
Vasili mo o lua le kima talipope.
Ia.
O lea se kala mai o ngā whai se kau kala ma ka ngā kai o le Fair Work Ombudsman. I le kaiminga kou o mai ai.
Ia wa taimun whaafisiri. E le iai lawa se matou so ta inga whaape taimun matou taun umai ai.
No, there was no communication, between us and those departments.
Was there any briefing provided at all?
Was there
Regarding
any,
the rights?
sorry, can you repeat, Grogan?
Yeah, was there any briefing whatsoever regarding your rights in the workplace?
Ngai ai lava se a fo ia se kalangoanga e whaamangingo ai ia o kou le kou rights po o le
Ai,
kou
tau.
saolokonga po o le mea ma whai o kou whaia i ko kongo Australia mga luenga kou iai ngai ai se kalangoanga whapea kai min kou o mai ai pe kou kele i o mai foi.
Ia, e le iai lawa se matou so ta inga pe e se whaamana manga o le tūlanga.
There was no briefing at all.
Thank you very much, Chair. That's all I have.
Good, thank you. Senator Small.
Yep, thanks, Chair. And in the interest of time, I'll be very brief. Can I just ask Talapope, on the diary record of working sheets that were tabled covering the period 8 November 2021 to 21 November 2021, can you please confirm for me that that is your handwriting?
Talipope, ola fasili ia oi.
Ia.
I lunga le time sheets po le pepa le kusele kaiminga e whainga luenga ai I le ba le aso balu o November I le aso lufu kasi o November.
Ia.
O lau kusi o ena kusi le pepa le.
Ia, sa o le lei.
Yes, that's correct. It was me.
Okay, great. And which union was involved in compiling these timesheets that were then provided to the committee?
O ai le yungi sa kou ngā lulua whaakasi ma whai ia pepa ia.
O le United Workers Union.
United Workers Union.
Just
Okay,
to be-
great.
they
What level of accuracy did you complete the timesheets to? I note that everything is either to the hour or the half hour. So
O le
what?
ala na... Sorry. Go ahead.
No. So I was just going to say, is it to the nearest half hour or to the nearest minute, or what level of accuracy?
O le alo malama le whaakumunga o le payslip o le timesheet I le malau kai mi whainga luenga. A whaape whaakumu a whaape ke whainga luenga se whakaika inga fo inga le e whaakumu anga I le awhai kūla po o le kūla. O la lau malama le whaakumunga o lau payslip I pe a whainga luenga
Ia, whaafitai le mo le
po
whaafisiri.
lau timesheet.
Ia, o le whaatumunga o le pepa lea, ia, e awhai tūlā, ia, po le tūlā fo ie, e whaanga ioi ei.
My understanding, and I am, confident it's to half an hour or to an hour.
Okay. And when were the records made? Were they completed at the end of each day, or at the end of each week, or at the end of each month?
O le whakumunga lao timesheet, e whakumu i ngā ua uma le aso, pe i ngā ua uma le vai aso, pe i ngā ua uma le masinga.
Ia o le whaatumuina le pepa lea o le aso lawa e whaingaluenga ai ma whaamaulalo.
It's every day, after work and then do it.
And were the records kept by the employer, or were they kept in the possession of the employee?
O le pepa la lea sa whaakumu e ku'u ia ke oe, pe ku'u ele puli o ngā duenga.
Ia o le pepa lea o ia te au lawa.
I keep it myself.
Okay. And so were they provided to anyone else?
Sa ave pepa ia I isi whakaka whainga duenga po ngiskangaka.
Ia, sa o le.
Yes, that's right.
Sorry, that was a question. So these timesheets were provided to who?
Ia,
O ai iska whainga oi. O ai iskangaka sa ave iai pepa ia.
Ia o le matou tim atoa lava sa atu whai le uni pepa ia.
Every single member in our team were given a copy of this paper, timesheet. And that was given by the union.
Uh-huh.
They were blank.
Okay. I'll just ask a couple of other questions, and I'll address them broadly.
So, can you just, Senator, if you don't mind, I just want to clarify something in the question you asked. Were the timesheets that were given to you by the union, were they blank or were they filled out?
O le timesheet le pol pepa lenga wako whaakumu e waku e le engi me o ye kukongu. Pe o lai ua o se pepa whainga le wakas pepa le se mo kusi ai.
Ia au mai au le whaakumu ea.
Ai kusa o le pepa e le se mea o le blank aia. Le se me o iai.
Thank you. Sorry,
Yeah.
back to you, Senator Small.
Okay,
Yes,
thanks,
yes, it's blank, and then I
thanks,
complete
Chair.
it.
So the Pacific Scheme is a government-to-government program. So obviously the High Commissioner does have a key role, and there are, as I understand it, formal channels to raise concerns between governments on that. So can I ask Ms Levitt why workers' welfare concerns
Senator Small, are you still with us? Just suspend. We'll just suspend for a moment whilst waiting for the Senator to come back on the line.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Ms Levitt, my question was that because it's a government-to-government program, and the High Commissioner has a key role in the formal channel between governments to discuss concerns, so I'm asking why concerns around workers' welfare wasn't raised immediately through those channels.
That's a question to me. I think that the response is that obviously bureaucratic processes are not easy for people to avail themselves of, especially when people are in a foreign country and their capacity to interact with the High Commissioner is limited. In circumstances where a High Commissioner has gotten involved, we've seen how that ended, because he was named on a border force raid and he underwent quite a lot of trouble as a result of trying to advocate for his people. So the question is, are the High Commissioners really in a position where they can question the Australian government, or are they in a position where they appreciate that, they're dependent on Australians Australia's money and foreign aid, and this is supposed to be a foreign aid program, and don't want to rock the boat lest they end up with nothing, right? And then there's also the liaison.
So my question is quite specific, Ms. Levitt. Why didn't you raise those matters yourself, given the consular responsibilities of High Commissioners?
Raise what? So I'm confused as to what you're asking. Raise what issues?
Well, I guess you're here suggesting that there is systemic exploitation of people participating in these schemes. That's an allegation you've made today, not me. So why
Yes.
has that not been raised by yourself directly?
Well, I'll respond by saying that the liaison officer for Samoa is towing the party line to an extent that would render my complaining to him futile. I've seen...
Sorry.
Yep.
So that's to say that you prejudged the outcomes of raising these issues through official channels and instead have been seeking to agitate for a class action from which you presumably stand to benefit financially.
I disagree emphatically. What I've been doing is directing workers who contact me to go through the official channels, namely the Pacific Labour Facility, that not a single one knew existed prior to the last hearing, right? So I'm telling... I don't have a responsibility to take on a diplomatic function. My responsibility is to advocate for people who are being presented with a situation that is untenable and illegal on every front. Now, I'm not a diplomat, and I don't want to be a diplomat, and I know that the diplomatic channels that I have explored in the past, specifically with the High Commissioner of Vanuatu, have resulted in absolutely nothing but the High Commissioner being on the chopping block, basically, and named in border force raids. So you tell me why I would bother going down that route when it's been such a disaster every other time. Also, I'd like to...
Sorry. I'm limited in my time asking questions, so I'll continue asking specific questions, thanks. When did Lita first ask you for assistance in this matter?
I believe she contacted me at the tail end of last year. It was about 4 months before we actually spoke. And again, I only met her and the boys on the day that I came to Canberra.
Ms. Levitt, have you been paid or could you be paid as a result of any class action involving these Pacific Island workers?
Eventually, potentially, yes. At the moment, I'm working on a pro bono basis, though, because as I pointed out earlier, there is no action on foot currently.
Are you aware of any communication to the workers providing written information around a class action or at least the potential for a class action?
I have not provided any written information directly to anyone about a class action. I know that we're all aware that I have a business that is related to class actions. So, yes, it's online, but I haven't directly approached anyone.
Right. So you are unaware of written communication from Lita to the Samoan workers asking them to join a class action?
Unless I'd been CC'd in them, I wasn't aware of them, and I don't recall having seen any, no.
Okay. With that, I'll hand back. Thank you, Chair.
Good. Thanks very much, Senator. We now adjourn for 15 minutes and return. We'll make it shorter. We'll just make it for 10 minutes, and we'll come back at 11:35. And now welcome Mr. Matthew Collard, Managing Director of Sunny Ridge Farms, and Mr. Lawrence Burt, CEO of Matic Incorporated, by video conference. And thank you for your time today and also holding with us. There's been a slight delay from the proceedings. For your benefit, my name is Senator Tony Sheldon and I am Chair of the committee. I'm joined by the Deputy Chair, Senator Matt Canavan and Senator Karen Grogan by video conference, and Senator Ben Small by teleconference. For the Hansard record, will you please state your names and the capacity in which you appear today? Mr. Collard first. I think you're on mute, Mr. Collard.
Sorry, Chair.
It's okay. I still do it, and I've been doing this for 3 years, so there you go. Thank you, Mr. Collard.
So, Matthew Collard, Managing Director of SR OpCo.
Thank you. Mr. Burt?
Lawrence Burt, Chief Executive Officer of MADEC Australia.
Thank you. I note that you have not made submissions, but have instead written to the committee with information regarding these matters, and thank you for that. Information on parliamentary privilege and the protection of witnesses and giving evidence to parliamentary committees has been provided to you as part of your invitation to appear. I now invite you to make an opening statement. At the conclusion of your remarks, I'll invite members of the committee to ask questions. Over to you, Mr. Collard.
Thank you, Chair. I'd firstly like to take the opportunity to thank the committee for allowing SR OpCo the opportunity to provide evidence today. As one of the largest independent strawberry growers in the country, operating for over 25 years, we are a strong supporter of the seasonal worker program and have prided ourselves on the retention of many seasonal workers who have requested to return to our farms over the years. Consequently, we were surprised to learn of the allegations made on the 2nd of February through a media article in the Sydney Morning Herald. As we had never received any written or verbal notification that Aleki or Kelly Pope would be attending the hearing, nor did we receive any notification that they would not be available for their scheduled days of work. The committee have published my email response dated 4 February, which contains the official pay data for Aleki and Kelly Pope between the 10th of November 2021 to the 2nd of February 2022. I've also submitted supplementary material to the committee dated 9 March, which I assume has been circulated to the members. The reason for submitting this material is to rectify what we consider to be false and misleading evidence provided to the committee on the 2nd of February. My supplementary material provides our concerns and disappointment in the inaccuracy of the hours recorded of work by Telepope for the period 11 to 17 November 2021. It is clear that in my supplementary material, MADEC workers did not work 4 of those 7 days on our Seville farm. The reason Telepope's pay reflected $100 net after the MADEC deductions was predominantly determined by the 19.75 hours worked. This is a significant variation to the 64 hours that was claimed on the 2nd of February, and on the evidence now before the committee leaves no plausible explanation other than the document headed diary record of working was fabricated for the purpose of misleading the committee. The company rejects the claims that workers need to ask for water at our Seville farm. Once again, my supplementary material details the provisions of tank drinking water and bottled water at the farm. This water is accessible to all workers, and management continually reinforce the necessity to monitor fluid intake to prevent dehydration. Whilst we can encourage and provide access to drinking water, we can't force workers to drink. Hence, we rely on communication from our management, MADEC supervisors, and the workers' self-desire to ensure hydration levels are met. My supplementary material to the committee also provides a detailed account of the 2 health and safety matters on separate farms in which our management attended. Both these situations were supported by actions of our employees, and in the incident on the 18th of December, I would go as far as stating that the National General Manager's actions may have saved the worker's life. In my 18-month term as Managing Director, I have not received any allegations from any other workers in respect to the health and safety matters addressed today. We are committed to providing a safe environment for our workers, and we respect the rights of witnesses to provide evidence under parliamentary privilege. However, we are compelled to ensure the committee has factual evidence which is not reckless, misleading or false, and allows for the records to be corrected. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Collard. Mr. Burt.
Thank you, Chair. MADEC's a not-for-profit organisation governed by a voluntary board of directors. We've been providing services in the community for the past 50 years. Across a range of different program areas, we provide relief to people experiencing disadvantage. In the seasonal worker program, We do this by creating employment opportunity. Opportunity for participants to work in Australia and achieve positive financial benefits that they otherwise may not have had access to. We create such opportunity since the program's commencement over a decade ago for many thousands of people thus far. Along with a number of other organisations, MADEX played a significant role in the development of the seasonal worker program, collaborating with the Australian Government to achieve the program's objectives. In MADEC alone, the casual employees we support across Australia achieve on average $30,000 per annum in net financial benefit. Net financial benefit after living costs such as accommodation, transport and health insurance. In total, this currently represents $70 million per annum in net financial benefit generated for MADEC workers, their families and their communities. The benefits generated are clearly substantial. I've been advised by the Senate Select Committee that my mission is to provide evidence on matters relating to the treatment of seasonal workers who gave evidence at the committee's public hearing on the 2nd of February 2022. I previously provided a written response to the committee on this matter on the 10th of February. Since that time, I haven't been provided with any further information beyond the unsubstantiated accusations responded to. Accusations that we reject. Reject the accusations that were unsubstantiated made by Samoan workers and their representatives on the 2nd of February. Following the 2nd of February, an extent evidence has been provided to our program managers, the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, in accordance with the appropriate legal process, a process that we participate in willingly and transparently. Documentary evidence that substantiates the comments I made in submission to the February. Documentary evidence provided that demonstrates that unsubstantiated accusations made against MADEC on the 2nd of February by the workers and their representatives were either false or misleading. Examples of accusations proved false by this evidence include accusations that employment offered was for hourly work, that piece rate payments were not agreed to, implications that workers were achieving sufficient accusations that workers not in the benefits were inappropriately taken.
Excuse me, Mr. Burt. Sorry to interrupt you. Just that there's not a very clear. We're picking up what you're saying, but it's not particularly clear. Would you mind if you turned off your video so that you could do it on the voice? That might be better for us. Go ahead, Mr. Burt.
Is that better, Chair?
That is better, thank you.
Yep. Accusations proven false with respect to no COVID testing provided during COVID isolation. Accusations that workers did not have access to water at work. Accusations workers did not receive medical care when required. Accusations that workers were underpaid against an official timesheet record that was supplied. As an ethical organisation, we always strive to achieve the seasonal worker program objectives while meeting compliance and statutory requirements. But there is always room for improvement. We don't attest to be perfect. It's a very complex and there is a very dry and challenging program area with border closures. Proud of the role in the evolution of what is to become harms contention, and we'll continue to work to ensure the best possible outcome for our participants. Thank you.
Mr. Burt, we picked up just about all the words and certainly was sort of clear at this end, but we might just suspend for a moment so we can get you on teleconference so that you don't miss any of the points you want to make from questions. So the Secretariat will contact you. We'll suspend now briefly. Hand over to Senator McCanavan to ask some questions.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to start by asking about the wages that were tabled. The information you provided to us about Tally Pope's wages in particular. This is to Sunny Ridge. Well, Sunny Ridge, I think, has provided this to us, but you quote official MADEC records showing 32.65 hours per week on average between the 10th of November and the 2nd of February, and the average net pay being $439.56. That only works out as a net pay of $13 an hour. So what was the gross pay over that period? Did you get that? Are you hearing me?
Thank you, Senator. I've got in front of me the documents I tabled on the 4th of February in front of me for the 12 weeks. Is that the period you're asking?
I haven't calculated exactly how many weeks. I said from the 10th of November to the 2nd of February.
Yes, so I've got here for Alecki that the gross payment was $11,763.17. And for Telepope, it was $11,552.70. So that was what I said on the 4th.
How many hours?
The hours aren't tallied here. I've got the individual hours every week, but I can tally those for you.
Yeah. I mean, the net pay is very low though. Like, what's your explanation of only getting $13 an hour in net pay?
In regards to net pay, we actually are responsible for the gross payment. The deductions is something that the improved employer is coordinating.
That's MADEC, is it?
That's MADEC. So I can't really give evidence to the breakdown and specific nature of deductions. I believe that will be MADEC that can provide you with that material. I can provide you with the gross payment and the hours.
Mr. Burt, have you got an explanation for? I mean, I don't have the gross wage in front of me. I don't have that information, but it would seem like at least there's a significant amount of deductions here. What's the justification for that?
Thank you, Senator Canavan. In the first 10 weeks of someone's arrival into Australia on the seasonal worker program, they work through a process of paying for the international airfare, visa costs, cash advances and other on arrival expenses that have been incurred by approved employers on their behalf. So that's spread across the first initial weeks of engagement and recovered on a weekly basis. In addition to that, there are weekly living costs, such as accommodation, transport and health insurance that are also recovered out of workers' salaries each week by their approved employer as well. In terms of some sort of stats around their earnings, over those 12 weeks, the two workers in question averaged between them $970 gross per week. Their net earnings after those deductions over their first 12 weeks was $390, which is well beyond the target net benefit that was articulated in the letter of offer that the workers agreed to prior to them leaving Samoa. In actual fact, their net benefit in that first 12 weeks was about 20% higher than their offer of employment indicated it would be.
Can you just explain that to me? I haven't heard of that before. So before they come to Australia, they get some kind of letter, do they, telling them this is what to expect?
As an approved employer, MADEC's responsible for providing an approved letter of offer, an offer of employment. It's quite detailed with respect to the type of employment that will be undertaken, the basis of payment, where workers will be living, and a whole range of other information. The letter of offer is approved by the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade before MADEC's permitted to provide that letter to the labour sending unit of the participating country. So it's quite transparent, and that letter of offer is then presented to the workers by the labour sending unit, the Samoan authorities, to make sure that workers fully understand its content.
Does that letter outline sort of how much they would be expected to be paid in absolute terms or a percentage of the deductions? What exactly, when you say net benefit, how's that presented to the worker?
It provides the worker an estimate of what their weekly gross earnings will be, what the estimates are for tax weekly, what the estimates are for each type of deduction that's going to be taken, and as a result, what the net financial benefit is each week. Typically, it shows two brackets of weeks. It'll demonstrate what the first 6 to 10 weeks look like, because you've got additional deductions for the repayment of upfront and on-arrival costs, and it'll then show what the weekly net benefits expected to be for the duration or remainder of the worker's assignment in Australia.
Okay, and you're saying that the pay that these workers received over that 3-month odd period was higher than the net amount they were presented with before leaving for Australia?
Correct. Higher than what was articulated in the letter of offer approved by the Australian government. Yep.
I'm just going to refer to the payslip that was tabled. This was the payslip that's got a header from Maydeck at least, and it was printed on the 18th of November. There are deductions listed there, and things like accommodation, $150. I mean, how do you provide that accommodation? Do you own the facilities that they stay in, or is that rented to some degree from someone?
We've resisted the urge or temptation to purchase accommodation. That's not our core business in the seasonal worker program. So all accommodation provided to workers is sourced commercially from commercial accommodation providers. In some circumstances, we may lease a house and then sublease bedrooms and to employees, but generally speaking, our preferred model is to just source from a commercial provider.
And you have those providers are completely arm's length from you? You don't own or have any financial interest in those accommodation providers?
Correct.
And the $150 on this particular payslip for the week, is that charged at cost, or are you applying a margin on top of what you have to pay the accommodation providers?
We're not permitted as an approved employer in the seasonal worker program to charge for recovery of any costs other than on an at-cost basis, whether it's transport, health insurance, airfares or accommodation. The rules state in the seasonal worker program all deductions have to be at cost in accordance with Fair Work expectations.
Yeah, I've done cost accounting. It can be a slippery term. So are there any overheads of yours or other costs applied into that $150?
No, the guidelines of the seasonal worker program prohibit administrative or overhead costs being applied.
Right. Okay. Just turning to, we asked questions before there about when you provide information about the timesheet, so to speak, or their titled diary record of working sheets that I'm sure you've seen that were tabled in the Senate last time. You've told us, and I just want to get this on the record, that Tally Pope, whose timesheets were the ones tabled, that he did not work on the 12th, 13th, 14th or 17th of November, despite these records saying he did. I just wanted to confirm that is your evidence?
Well,
I don't mind. Just to whoever can verify that.
I think that was part of my submission.
Yes.
Senator. Yep. So look, I can answer. Yes, I can confirm that the Seville farm, didn't engage Maydeck workers basically due to weather conditions and low volume fruit. So we just did not have pickers on site. It was physically impossible that Tally Pope could have worked those days for us because we didn't engage any Maydeck workers.
Okay, right. And so was Tally Pope scheduled to work on those days?
If we'd had fruit and we'd had demand, then yes, that Maydeck crew could have easily been engaged on those days.
Would he have been would he have thought that he was going to work on those days? When do you let them know? When do they find out that this is your roster for this week?
Lawrence, do you want me to leave that to you with your team liaising with the crew?
Typically, the team would be advised at the start of a week what those days of attendance look like for the coming week. Certainly wouldn't be for a full fortnight. And that advice, then if it changes, is updated on a sort of day-to-day basis between the farm managers that are on site and the team leaders that are working with the team. That pay slip was from a very early part of the workers' engagement. I would strongly doubt whether there was a fortnight's worth of roster provided by Sunny Ridge at that time when the season was just getting started.
Although, I mean, in just to be clear, if you didn't hear the evidence from Telepope, my recollection of that was that he filled this out on a daily basis, I think, or after a shift he would fill out the hours as the evidence he provided. I mean, would he have, you might not be able to recall this, but for that week, or for the week and the week over those days that he didn't work, would he have been advised at the start of the week about the lack of fruit and no work, or would that sometimes happen, the day before? Sorry, we were going to work, but there's no fruit. When would that have been advised? It's probably to you, Mr. Collard.
Thanks, Senator. Look, at the end of the day, my understanding, and I'm not the technical head of farms, but we did have low temperatures the week before. They were below daytime and night temperatures, which was impacting on the fruit. So I would assume there was every chance it may have been a couple of days notification in advance based on what we were seeing the week before.
Okay. And look, just finally on this, are these sheets that you've seen, do they look like anything that you record, either yourselves, Madec, or Sunny Ridge? Is this the same sort of template or form that you record hours in?
From Sunny Ridge, no.
And Mr.
No, Madec, it's not an official Madec timesheet record, no.
So you've never seen anything like this in this format until you saw the table documents from the Senate?
Yes.
I've seen formats like that over time, but nothing consistently from our workers in our seasonal worker program.
Okay, and you weren't aware of the evidence we received earlier was that these timesheets were compiled with the assistance of the union, or the involvement at least of the union. Were you aware that the union were doing this at all, or had you seen these sort of sheets before?
I'm certainly aware that the UWU are working closely with the workers at Sunny Ridge and a number of the other farms that our workers are hosted to, and we have weekly meetings with the UWU as well to resolve issues that are raised. We've got quite a constructive relationship with that team. So no, we're aware they're closely engaged.
I mean, when you compare the timesheets with the payslip, it's clear that if the timesheets were correct, Mr. Telepope had not been paid for some work. Had you received any complaints from the union of underpay or a lack of pay in regards to this, Mr. Telepope?
No.
Okay. And likewise for you, Mr. Collard?
No, we hadn't received any complaints. And normally it would be Madec that follow us up on the pays, the gross pays to their employees. So obviously Lawrence not receiving any complaints would flow through to us not in receiving any queries or complaints from Madec.
Look, I just wanted to move quickly to the allegations of parliamentary privilege and what have you, but I mean, if the chair needs to stop me, I'm fine with that. But on the 2nd of February, when the hearings occurred, were any of the workers that appeared scheduled to work that day?
Lawrence,
I don't know who would know that information. So either of you,
well, I would assume so. I can't speak with authority on the matter. I would assume so, though. It's a standard working day of the week, and there weren't any reasons that we were aware of. We were under the we were clueless really about where the workers were.
Could you take that on notice? I mean, I'm a little bit. I mean, this is a key issue. So you hadn't asked anyone before this hearing about what they were scheduled to do that week?
I can respond to what was meant to happen the week leading into the hearing. So
okay.
I can respond that Telepope for Sunny Ridge actually didn't present for work on the 26th of January, the 27th of January, the 28th of January, and the 31st of January. I can also confirm that Aleki didn't present for work on the 30th and the 31st of January, and he left unauthorised early on the Thursday, the 27th of January. So I'm aware of those absentees, but I can't tell you exactly at this moment in time.
And were all of
scheduled for the
those
second.
were all of those absentees without reason, or did
Yes,
they?
without reason. There was no medical certificate. There was no explanation. It was without.
What would be the normal? I mean, I don't know if you heard earlier, Tally Pope mentioned that he had been absent some days for being sick. What would be the normal? Is there an expectation that they let you know on the morning of, or how do they do that? Do they let Nick know or somebody know they can't come to work because they're sick?
It's my understanding Telepope did provide a medical certificate post the hearing because he was still working on our farm post the hearing.
Right.
And look, that's acceptable. That's normal course of business and running an operation in Australia. You know, it
So you're not necessarily notified the day of, like,
No, it can be the next day or it can be that afternoon. It's just one of the challenges you have.
So you don't know at this. No one has any information about what work was scheduled the week of the hearing in the first week of February. Then you don't know what was his scheduled hours. Notwithstanding his absentees, he was still on your books for that week.
Yes, happy to take notice and come back to that, Senator.
If you could take that on notice about what was scheduled to work. You've obviously seen that post the hearing, there's been allegations that upon their return, they weren't, or their shifts were changed. Were they scheduled to work on the days following the 2nd of February?
If I can include that on the information, we'll come back to you on.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I'm a bit perplexed that you don't have that information, Mr. Collard, because that's the allegation that I'm sure you've seen.
No, actually,
you don't know.
Senator, I received confirmation on the Monday the 7th that what I'd be responding to is the allegations of the 2nd of February. That was what I was of the understanding. There was also a suggestion that about treatment towards these workers. And look, to be honest, our decision on the 31st of January was that we asked MADEC if they could please move on 5 workers due to non-attendance. So I didn't look into the post-week if that action had been taken up.
Okay, well, we'll move to that. So I saw that your evidence is that on the 31st of January, you were notified that the workers, both Telepope and Alecki, who appeared today, among 3 others, I think, among 5 workers, wanted to be relocated. So when did, and this is to either of you, I don't know how it works internally, but when was the decision made to seek relocation?
Relocation.
When did you decide that they should be relocated? You received the request on the 31st of January. That's the evidence you provided us. I'm assuming that's correct. When, after the 31st of January or on the 30th of January, did you decide, okay, we'll relocate, we'll no longer have these workers and we'll seek to relocate them? When was that decision made?
So from a MADEC perspective, when we received notice on the 31st of January that Sunny Ridge wanted the workers removed from that farm, we, from that point, were resigned to the fact that we'd need to relocate them to somewhere else. They remained in our employment, but we were going to be under an obligation then to, in conjunction with the Department of Foreign Affairs approval process, find an alternative host employer.
Do you have to notify the department of a relocation when you want to do that?
Yes, typically an incident will be lodged with the Department of Foreign Affairs, and we then need to seek their approval of what would be an appropriate alternative. That approval process can take a number of weeks after we've been able to source an alternative location.
So when did you notify the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade that you wanted to relocate these workers?
I can't confirm on what date we did, but I certainly can confirm that we're in communication with them on the matter, yes.
Was it before or after the hearing on the 2nd of February?
I couldn't confirm that without going and checking some records. Sorry, Senator.
But just to be, well, could you take on notice when you did notify the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade?
Yep. Yes.
Thank
certainly.
you. And just to be clear, you said you made the decision on the 31st of January to relocate when you received the request. The decision was made.
Yes, we had no alternative. Like we couldn't put them back onto the Sunny Ridge farm. We needed to find an alternative, which we now have.
I just find some of your evidence seems inconsistent because you told me earlier that you didn't know whether they were scheduled to work the first week of February, yet now you're telling me that you'd made a decision on the 31st of January to relocate them. So why would you have been unclear about whether they were scheduled to work on the first week of February?
What I'm unclear about is whether Sunny Ridge Farms had, prior to the 31st of January, set a roster to specify what that work program looked like into the future. What I am clear about is on the 31st of January, we were told that the workers would have to relocate to somewhere else. So whether there was a future roster or not that had been set by Sunny Ridge for them, we at that point obviously resigned ourselves to the fact that we'd have to relocate them. And that there would be no further work there for them.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for that, gentlemen. Thank you, Chair.
And thanks, Senator Canavan. Senator Grogan.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. This morning, Ms. Sulmama Dugan gave us some information about the Samoan High Commissioner and an interview on the radio, where he allegedly made some comments about the intervention of a liaison officer to ensure that the Samoan workers that are the subject of this conversation did not their employment terminated. Is that true?
Samoan. I'll answer that, Senator Grogan. The Samoan liaison officer didn't approach MADEC and beg us, as was the suggestion, not to terminate workers. Termination of the workers from MADEC's employment hadn't been contemplated. The Samoan liaison officer has confirmed to me that he didn't advise the Samoan High Commissioner of that having occurred. So we're really left a little clueless as to what's transpired there. But the workers were never scheduled for dismissal. We didn't contemplate dismissal. Relocation was our only concern.
Okay. So do you have any idea why then the matter would have been raised by the High Commissioner? No, I can't presume to understand why that's happened. We've certainly conveyed our concerns in that regard to the Department of Foreign Affairs and requested that they take that up with the High Commission to unpack what's gone on there. Because I'm sure you can understand the concerns of this committee where we're having quite robust evidence being provided by all sides and it just does not match up. So just really trying to understand what other things might be at play or what issues might be arising. So one of the, in your correspondence, Mr. Burt, to the committee on the 10th of February, it refers to one of the issues allegedly raised by the High Commissioner in that radio interview, that of repatriation. And your letter says, and I'll quote here, MADEC staff that are responsible for the Sunny Ridge assignment have advised that they cannot recall having discussed repatriation with the Samoan workers. And maybe this is just a point of clarity, but the term cannot recall seems less than robust in the sense that the conversation that could have been had would have been had to have had in the last 6 to 7 days. So they returned to the farm on the 3rd of February and the letter was received to the committee on the 10th of February. Is that because there's some doubt that they cannot recall, that there's some doubt in how the conversation flowed?
No, not at all, Senator Grogan. We don't threaten people with repatriation. Repatriation is something that generally is subject to worker choice at the moment, and even when workers do choose to repatriate, it's a little bit challenging with the receiving countries routinely closing their borders at the moment. No, we're under no doubt that we didn't about that action. We didn't threaten anyone with repatriation. We didn't talk to anyone about repatriation. I should have, in hindsight, used stronger words in my reply.
Thank you for that. So you say that you don't think it would even have been discussed. So maybe if it was not sort of put as a direct, this is a potential consequence, or this is a consequence, that it would have been put to them as these are one of the things that sometimes happens, or do you think is there wriggle room in there for someone to have said something at all? Do you believe?
It's difficult to contemplate that could happen. Like, our staff that are involved on the front line aren't involved in repatriation processes. The bulk of the repatriation exercises and approvals are coordinated from a central level. If there was any possibility of repatriation being something that was happening, we would have known about it centrally. I just can't imagine that anyone would be having that conversation. These workers have only been in Australia for 12 weeks. Like, they're not even close to finishing the 9 months that they've been assigned for, and we just don't early repatriate people. So I don't know how. I don't know. I just can't speak for why anyone would even consider a conversation like that.
Okay. That clears up nothing. Thank you very much. No offence to you. Just we are hearing a lot of conflicting evidence here. So you said in some earlier correspondence, Mr. Burt, to the committee that Sunny Ridge Farm informed the view that the workers had absconded while they were in Canberra providing evidence to the committee. And again, this is the point where we're seeing two very robust opposing positions. The workers have confirmed to us today that they did tell their team leader on the 30th of January that they were going to come to the Senate inquiry, and that they would be returning on Thursday, the 3rd of February. And Ms. Suleiman also told us that she spoke with Rob Hay on the 31st of January in a phone conversation and advised him that she was on her way from the airport and was approximately 20 minutes away to pick up the workers. So that sounds like there were two very separate advice from the workers to be relayed up the food chain that you're saying did not occur. Is that right?
Speaking to the contact with Rob Hay, our communication from Rob Hay was that he was under the belief that the workers had absconded, a belief that typically is formed when people are absent from work, absent from their accommodation, aren't contactable, and absent without any notice. That's the first I've heard that there is an alleged conversation between Ms. Duggan and Rob Hay on the 31st. I'd have to follow that up with Rob to investigate the veracity of that. Based on previous statements that Rob's made, that doesn't sound correct.
Well, if you could take that on notice and just confirm whether Mr. Hay did or did not have a conversation with Ms. Duggan on 31st, and whether he did or did not say that he would wait 20 minutes for her to arrive from the airport, and whether he did or did not receive information from her that the workers were going to Canberra to appear, well, for any reason, but to appear in front of the Senate committee. That would be really helpful.
Absolutely.
Now the other piece here is in reference to your letter to the committee of the 10th of February, which references an advice from Sunny Ridge HR manager on the 31st of January to relocate 6 Samoan workers. Because they were disengaged from work and not attending on scheduled days of picking, which was placing pressure on the operation. And just earlier, Mr. Collard talked about some absentee dates that I'll just get you to re-clarify in a moment. But in looking at the information provided by you regarding the activities of the 2 workers that presented, Aleki and Telepope, I note that in the last 3 weeks of January, they both worked well over 40 hours a week. And in the first week of January, they worked very, very close to 40 hours a week at 39.5. And in one of those weeks, indeed, they were working 48 hours. So I'm not sure how that, can you explain to me how that is a disengagement? Because I assume that the period of time, if you were advised on the 31st of January, that you wanted to locate, that they had requested a relocation and that you believed that they were disengaged, and that Sunny Ridge believed they were disengaged. Those 2 things don't seem to make sense to me. That they were both disengaged and working over 40 hours a week.
Matt?
Is this a question for me?
Well, I guess this is the issue, isn't it? Mr. Burt, whether these are your records of hours, but Ms. Collard, it's your request apparently to have them relocated because they're disengaged and not paying attention in the work.
I'll provide my reply, Senator. It's if you look at that spreadsheet that was submitted, you'll note that the pay run for the period we're talking about is actually the 2nd of the 2nd, 2022, and you'll see that their hours drop right off. So the week before it's 48.03 and 47.95 hours for Aleki and Telepope respectively, and then you'll see those hours drop off to 22.67 and 7.25. That's the period we're referring to in the period I listed those dates of absentee from work, scheduled work.
So you would make that determination in the space of less than a week.
Okay, so if I can explain from a grower's perspective, and particularly in the summer months, we obviously don't have the right to determine when our fruit is ripening on the plant. And we are under pressure and we have scheduled labour there to pick specific blocks. If that fruit is not picked in, and for strawberries often a 24 to 48 hour window, and if it's warmer, that window could be reduced, we don't get a second chance. So it is vital for us that labour does present itself when it's been scheduled to work on that day and present on that day. So look, our tolerance is unfortunately not like maybe other industries within this country. We have one shot of picking our fruit, and if we don't get that opportunity, then unfortunately it becomes wastage or it's rejected by the major retailers.
So then, Mr. Burt, can I ask, did you provide additional workers then from the 1st of February to Mr. Collard?
Not that quickly, I don't believe. I think we might have redeployed some additional workers in the last week or so, but I can't speak categorically on that. But we didn't swap workers other workers in at that time, I don't believe.
Okay, so Mr. Collard, you've asked for those workers to be removed, and how did you go about, given the importance, as you just outlined for us, of picking your fruit, which I totally understand, how did you go about filling those shifts?
It's difficult, Senator. I can tell you from the 22nd of December through all of January, we have struggled with COVID and positive cases and the definition of close contact. So it has been a struggle for the last few months. What we normally do is we'll make calls to labour hire companies, or we'll talk to our other seasonal worker providers to see if we can pick up additional resources, or we have to manage by determining what labour we allocate to maybe our raspberry or our blueberry blocks, which are present up on this Seville farm, and whether we have to make sacrifices across the 3 berries that we're picking at the time. So it's a management issue, and it's not desirable. The optimum for us was for the workers that are scheduled to be there on the day actually present themselves on the day.
Okay, so then again, back to this spreadsheet. If there are other weeks where the hours are quite low, is that because you chose, because you didn't have the fruit to pick, or is that because they didn't work?
Well, back in November, it was definitely because the volume of fruit was low. And I'm just looking at the spreadsheet and looking at the other hours in regards to, say, specifically the week of the 8th of the 12th, 2021, I would have to liaise with my team and just check what the environmental conditions were that week, and whether it was one of unauthorised absentee or whether it was one dictated by environmental factors.
Okay. Yeah. That does, yeah. It does seem hasty. I appreciate what you're saying. Given that they, to have advised you want them moved on the 31st when they were working 40 odd hours the week before. Anyway, Mr. Collard, you wrote to the committee shortly after the hearing to, in your words, correct the record, which is totally your right. That letter has been published on the committee's website with the personal details obviously redacted. As you know, the workers at Sunny Ridge are actually employees of MADEC.
Yes.
By nature of how the program works. So, but you are obviously, as an employer, in the way that your employment relationship works, you still have obligations to these workers as a PCB, person conducting a business or undertaking, under the workplace health and safety laws. You are aware of that?
Yes.
And beyond your statutory obligations, do you also take an interest in their welfare? Obviously, as you would know, there's a lot of things being thrown up here in terms of pay, deductions, wellbeing. What's your approach to that, accepting that MADEC is the employer? Do you take an interest in those things?
Look, we absolutely do. And if it's raised with the management, the Sunny Ridge management at the time, then our management will liaise with MADEC to follow up those concerns. We're very conscious of our requirements of providing a safe workplace, and we take that very seriously, and we implement that. In regards to pastoral care or accommodation, if those issues are raised with our management, then our management will liaise with MADEC.
Okay. And do you ever have cause, can you recall a time when you have had cause to approach MADEC about that?
Look, we've had a situation that I can recall when I first started as managing director, where I believe a few MADEC workers were querying their tray rates for a day, and we shared that information with MADEC, as they're the ones that are providing the pay advice, and followed up with that. We're always happy to be transparent on gross payments and hours worked, because that's our responsibility of recording and sharing with not only the picker, but also MADEC as the employer.
So do you provide those pay records to MADEC and to the workers, or just to MADEC?
It's provided to Madex that then put it in a pay advice to the worker.
Okay.
Senator Grogan, I can also confirm, just further to that question posed to Matthew, our frontline staff are in regular contact with respect to the activities, daily activities on the farm, and any issues that are raised to us, we certainly take those back to the farm as well. And troubleshoot and problem solve those issues also. So there's a frontline collaboration in that regard. I'm confident of that.
Okay. So look, just to finish up, if I can ask that you provide us those breakdowns of day-by-day work for the two workers, for Taupo and for Aleki, because it doesn't seem to gel the speed at which you chose to have them removed based on your assertion that they were disengaging from work. So we can compare that up. That would be very helpful. Back to you, Chair.
Good, thanks. Thanks. I'm mindful of time, so I just have one question. Mr. Collard, there was a letter from Mr. Alston, the chair of Sunny Ridge, to the Fair Work Commission, where he complains that having to pay workers a national minimum wage, the lowest wage payable to any employee in Australia, is, I quote, generous, high and massive. Do you agree with Mr. Alston that paying the minimum wage to employees is generous?
I don't have that document in front of me, Senator. I'll take what you've just said. Look, I guess what I can say is that we make sure we comply with the legislative requirements and the piece rates. It's commercial logic that we would like our pickers to be remunerated and for them to earn as maximum dollars as they can, which would mean that our productivity and our volume of fruit picked is high. I don't have any objections to the piece rate. We're conscious of the new legislation coming in at 28 April.
Yes. Thank you. And just a final question. Just on, in your letter, on one of the main reissues that have been asked to speak about today is the evidence provided by workers on the 2nd of February that in some weeks they have worked more than 60 hours at Sunny Ridge and after deductions have taken home just $100 for 60 hours work. There is a disagreement between you and the workers as to how many hours were worked for the $100 take-home pay. They say 60 hours, which would be just $1.60 per hour. You say actually they only worked 30.38 hours that week, which would be a $3.29 an hour take-home pay. We are not here to work out how many hours were worked, but if we were arguing between earning $1.60 an hour or $3.29 an hour, there's clearly a problem, isn't there?
Senator, sorry, I just want to point out that was 19.75 hours for that week in question.
Thank you.
And in regards to gross pay, I have on the records that I've submitted to the committee $501.85 of gross payment, and then Madex provided the deductions that gave you the $100 net.
Yeah, so the take-home pay was $100, and there was an occasion where there was 30.38 hours where $100 was paid, wasn't there? So the take-home pay was $100.
Is this for Aleki or Talipo?
This is, understand,
I can see on that spreadsheet that Aleki on the 8th of the 12th, 2021, did a total hours of 30.38 hours, which
yes.
We paid him $937.20. And then with Madex deductions and the tax, he netted $100 for that week.
Thank you. Just then back to my question, just final question. So we're arguing between earning $1.60 an hour or $3.29 an hour. There's clearly a problem, isn't there?
Well, I think what I believe personally is that the apples for apples benchmark should be the gross amount paid for the hours worked. I think when we get into deductions, that's a separate matter. If we're comparing exploitation in a country where, we look at gross pay for hours worked or job description, the deductions, as I believe Lawrence has proposed, a high in the first 10 weeks because there's things such as reimbursement for returned airfares. But from a grower's perspective, we're responsible for the gross payment. And the gross payment, as far as I'm concerned, was $937 to Alecki that week for 30.38 hours worked.
Thank you, Mr. Collard. And I just want to just say, it just seems to me that, and this is a system across the board, where people are taking home just $100 a week for that many hours, that there's something fundamentally wrong with the system. It does need a proper look at. I mean, that's not an expectation that any Australian worker would have to be taking only $100 a week home, which means the system needs to be overhauled. But thank you very much for your evidence. I appreciate both of you coming and joining us today, Mr. Bird as well. If you have any questions on notice, please provide responses to the Secretariat by midday, Friday the 17th of March 2022. Thank you for your evidence today. I now adjourn and we'll recommence at 12:45. I now welcome representatives from the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade and Mr. Sala, Acting Australian Engagement Manager, Community Networks from the Palladium Group. For your benefit, my name is Senator Tony Sheldon. I am the Chair of the committee and I'm joined by Deputy Chair Senator Matt Canavan, Senator Ben Small and Senator Karen Grogan by teleconference. For the Hansard record, will you please state your names, the capacity in which you appear today?
Thank you, Senator. If I may, in my first language, would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land before I speak. Ona mumua na o whaatilo, I la tau iana whanua, ma ele whalanganu, ulo tātou whanoaile nei tai ao. I la tau taitai, ua whailangi wholaunga, I la tau taitai alo soifua mai pea, ai me se suli ale numanai, ale Nangawo country people, Canberra, Australia. Thank you, Senator. My name is George Sala and I'm here in my capacity as the Acting Australian Engagement Manager for the Pacific Labour Facility.
Thank you.
Good morning, Senator and Senators on the line. Danielle Heineke, First Assistant Secretary, Labour and Connectivity Division, Office of the Pacific, DFAT. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good morning, Senator Sheldon. Ewan McDonald, Head of the Office of the Pacific, and good morning to you and the Senators.
Thank you.
And good morning, Chair. My name's Gavin Murray. I'm the Team Leader for the Pacific Labour Facility.
Good, thank you. I note that neither DFAT nor Palladium have made submissions to the committee. Before the committee starts taking evidence from the Commonwealth officers appearing today, I remind committee members that the Senate has resolved that an officer of a department of the Commonwealth or of a state shall not be asked to give opinions on matters of policy and shall be given reasonable opportunity to refer questions asked of the officer to superior officers or to a minister. This resolution prohibits only questions asking for opinions on matters of policy and does not preclude questions asking for explanations of policies or factual questions about when and how policies were adopted. Information on parliamentary privilege and the protection of witnesses and giving evidence to the parliamentary committees has been provided to you as part of your invitation to appear. I now invite you to make an opening statement if you would like. At the conclusion of your remarks, I'll invite members of the committee to ask questions. Mr. Salo, would you like to make any opening statement?
Thank you, Senator. So my role as the Acting Australian Engagement Manager for PLF includes the overseeing of the community engagement activities for the program, the cultural competency aspects of the program, as well as overseeing the activities and the capacity building work for our country liaison officers.
Thank you. I now go to Senator Small. Senator Small.
Thanks, Chair, and good afternoon, folks. I'll just ask my questions by addressing them generally, and then I'll invite whoever is appropriate to respond. I want to start, first of all, with the program, the Pacific Labour Scheme in a general sense. Can you please provide at a high level the department's perspective on the matter of deductions and what constitutes a reasonable deduction, what protections are in place to protect workers from exploitation? I guess I'm keen to understand that very important aspect in some detail.
So, Senator Ewan McDonald, Head of the Office of the Pacific, if I can start. So, Senator, in relation to the Pacific Labour Scheme, which the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade has been responsible for since 2018, there are guidelines in place around those deductions that, of course, we sign off on as a department, and those deductions are worked out between the employee and the employer and signed off by the department. The seasonal worker program, of course, we've just taken over. In fact, the completion of that machinery of government change was in January of this year. So responsibilities around that were for the Department of Employment, Skills and Education. And of course, they had guidelines in place around those deductions as well.
So when you say that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, Senator.
I think Mr McDonald's finished, Senator.
Oh, okay, yeah, perfect, sorry. So when you say that the deductions are signed off by the department, do you mean the principles of deduction are signed off, or do you mean the individual claims or dealings between employers and employees are signed off?
So, Senator, I'll ask Ms Heineke to add to this, but in terms of the example that Senator Sheldon spoke about earlier, that sign-off would have occurred within the Department of Education, Skills and Employment at the time after discussions between the employer and the employee, but Ms Heineke might want to add to that.
Danielle Heineke, First Assistant Secretary, Labour and Connectivity Division. Senator, there's a couple of levels. So, yes, at a principals level, and this is signed off at the deed level, so the deed that sits between formerly DESI, now DFAT, and the employer under the seasonal worker program. There is a set of guidelines that require, for example, those deductions for pre-departure costs to be paid back over the first 12-week period. There's also requirements in the deed around ensuring that welfare and cost of living is able to be provided through that gap in payroll. There is, importantly, information provided by the department with the labour sending units pre-departure and on arrival, and we've actually got all of those documents translated as simple fact sheets into all of the language, and I'm happy to table those today. They've been translated by the Pacific Labour Facility to benefit each sending country, so they can explain those deductions both pre-arrival and on arrival, things like accommodation, etc., to the workers. Then there is a contract that sits between the employer and the worker that was discussed in earlier evidence today, and those contracts are explained to the worker beforehand, so they understand and sign off on the particular deductions. Things like accommodation, for example, are fairly high in Australia, and just explaining that will be the cost that comes out of their salary.
And when you say beforehand, you mean before they depart their country of origin? That's
correct.
I think it would be very useful if you could table those documents that you referred to. That's quite important. Does the department audit or undertake some sort of compliance activity with employers that are participating in the scheme?
Yes, we do, Senator, and Ms Heineke will also outline that for you.
Senator, yes. I'll talk first about the seasonal worker program because that's the evidence that I think you're after today. So DESI formerly and now DFAT from the 20th of January does undertake assurance and compliance activities. They're risk-based. This year, just to give you, this financial year, to give you a sense, there's been 83 physical monitoring visits for SWP, and that has involved interviews with over 1,143 workers. It's an audit approach. For this financial year, it's constituted 34% of all SWP employers. Of course, that's not the only avenue that is used to look at compliance with the deed. There are also whistleblowers and other ways through our country liaison officers, which are usually, there are other diplomats from foreign countries that provide a consular service, or they're employed in Australia by those high commissions to undertake those roles. They do also provide information to us, as well as at times high commissions who do regular trips around Australia to talk to their employers. So as a result, we do take action. From those 83 this year, just as an example, we did identify 18 minor actions. There was actually an action last week where we did identify major actions. So it is an important part of the deterrent, but also the monitoring any upfront issues that have come to us through those visits.
Yes, and this might be a good time to start to talk through the specifics of this particular case. That's very useful information at the sort of program level. Now, in terms of the department's engagement with Ms. Levitt, with reference to the particular allegations that have been made to this committee, has DFAT requested information or otherwise sought supporting or substantiating information from Ms. Levitt with respect to this particular case?
Yes, we have, Senator.
So that's extraordinary. Can you please outline when and how you sought to obtain that information and what response you have received?
Senator, I think Ms Heineke is best to answer that. She's specifically made those requests.
Thank you, Senator. I first contacted Levitt Robinson. At the time, I wasn't sure which member, so through their general information email on the 13th of December following the media allegations, and the reason for that contact was to seek evidence so we could investigate. At the time it was being managed by DESI, but we're in the process of a machinery of government change. So I did it in that capacity of inheriting the seasonal worker program. Since then, we have followed up verbally here at the hearing on the 2nd of February, on the 7th of February, the 15th of February, and again on the 8th of March to seek that information so we can commence investigations. Without pay slips, without evidence, without workers, without employers, we cannot investigate. Really important to note that those 4 workers that did provide evidence on the 2nd, we immediately commenced proceedings under the deed and have referred any of the pay slip conditions, piece rate application issues to the Fair Work Ombudsman that has the appropriate expertise to investigate, which is normal process under the SWP.
So, despite those repeated attempts to obtain the information necessary for action under the deed from the departmental perspective and a referral to the appropriate regulator, would it be fair to summarise that by saying you have received less than satisfactory compliance with those requests?
Senator, I think it's fair to say that we have not received the information we requested in order to investigate those fully. I think Ms Heineke made the point, as soon as we do receive that information, which the Senate elicited for us on a number of cases, we have immediately actioned those. So as soon as we get that information, we will action it immediately, and we don't have it at the moment in relation to a couple of cases.
So that takes the conduct of those who stand to financially benefit from a class action in respect of potentially exploited people, and the less than wholesome answers given to my colleague earlier today, Senator Canavan, in a particularly disgraceful light. Can I turn now to the engagement that has or has not occurred with the High Commissioner in respect of this particular case? What are you aware from a departmental perspective has taken place between the department and the High Commissioner for Samoa?
Senator, we can certainly comment in relation to that since we've had responsibility for the program, but we have regular conversations with the High Commissioners. As Ms Heineke mentioned, we would like to hear about any issues that arise immediately they arise, so we're having regular conversations. In relation to the matters that were raised here, Ms Heineke has had discussions with the High Commissioner. Ms Heineke may want to add to that.
Senator, as Mr McDonald has said, we have regular contact, and in relation to this case, I've had regular dialogue with the Samoan High Commissioner. Our High Commissioner to Samoa, based in Apia, has also discussed issues broadly around labour mobility. It's a regular dialogue point, as well as the issues that have come out of this case with the relevant authorities in Samoa. We work with the Samoan liaison officer to resolve issues. The way that we try and do that in the Pacific Labour Scheme and through the Pacific Labour Facility, which obviously has a different mandate and a different history to the SWP, we work very closely to try and liaise to resolve issues before they become major issues. Importantly, we do also make sure that there's support to High Commissions and liaison officers to visit their workers here in Australia, and we regularly actually participate with them where there's particular critical incidents in location. For example, earlier this month when there was some challenges with Vanuatu in relation to cases, we travelled up with them to Northern Queensland to meet with the High Commissioner and workers to make sure that we could take on any welfare issues and work with the High Commissions and liaison officers from relevant countries to proactively look at issues. And the PLF plays an important role in that, given their strong Pacific Island employee base within that facility who speak language and are able to take a cultural approach to resolving issues proactively.
Thanks, Ms Heineke. I've used my time, so I'll yield back to you, Chair. Thanks.
Thanks, Senator. Senator Grogan.
Thank you, Chair. So it's important to note that you're appearing in the context of this privileges hearing, as ultimately DFAT and Palladium both have some responsibility for the seasonal worker program workers through the Pacific Labour Facility, including those we've heard from today who've been disadvantaged by giving evidence in the Senate. So we've just got some baseline questions first. What's been the total sum of money that Palladium has received from the federal government thus far to implement the program? Mr Sala.
Senator, as Ms Heineke mentioned earlier, there are two different arrangements between the seasonal worker program and the Pacific Labour Scheme. Palladium were engaged as part of the Pacific Labour Scheme in a tender back in 2018. That tender had a value of up to $70 million on it in terms of the provision of the Pacific Labour Facility that applied to the Pacific Labour Scheme. In relation to the seasonal workers program, of course, DESI had responsibility for that program and they had different arrangements in place. Of course, now the programs are coming together, we're looking at how we best establish the future of the program as we go forward. There are some areas that we've asked the Pacific Labour Facility to help. For example, the 24-hour helpline we have in place for all our Pacific Labour Scheme workers. We've also made available to seasonal workers as well because we want to hear any concerns they have, and they've also helped during COVID where we've had particular instances where some employees, due to their personal circumstances, could not, for example, get back into their own country because of COVID, that they've needed some additional support and movement. We've also used them for that purpose as well.
Okay, so the totality of that is $70 million up to.
Yeah, so the contract was let in 2018 and it always has a value, expected value of that contract, Senator. It was let after an open tender process and approved within the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade for the Pacific Labour Scheme.
Mm-hmm. And the contract that sets out Palladium's responsibility as the contractor implementing the PLF is a DFAT agreement number 74040. Is that correct?
I don't have it off the top of my head, Senator, but you're probably right. It is definitely a DFAT contract, yes.
Yeah, just ensuring that any additions or amendments that we're clear what we're talking about, which contract we're talking about. There's just the one contract, no additions or amendments?
I think in 2018 it was established. It may have had one variation, I think, Ms Heineke, is that right?
There has been a number of variations since first signed. Originally it was actually a $50 million contract because it only was working with 3 countries. But when the government announced the step up and we expanded it to 10 countries immediately, we did increase the resources primarily so the Pacific Labour Facility could support the other 7 countries, which are all, the original 3 countries were just the small countries because we had a predecessor program that just worked with Tuvalu, Nauru and Tuvalu. So we expanded it to 10 when the Pacific Step Up was announced in late 2018. There has been, sometimes amendments are also required when you do internal reallocations within that 70 million, and we have done that on occasions when we've needed to execute duties as the need for evolution in that contract has been required.
Cool. Mr Sala, could I ask you a few questions?
Sure, Senator.
Thanks. Hi. Can you summarise what your responsibilities are in the seasonal worker program, especially those relating to employees, to the worker welfare?
Thank you. In terms of the seasonal worker program, that's not officially a responsibility under the PLS, as the PLS workers are, or the PLS program under the Pacific Labour Facilities is what we manage. However, as alluded to earlier, there are examples as to where PLF has been called on to assist in that particular program. At the current time, Senator, the SWP hotline, or sorry, the helpline is 0262405234. So the Pacific Labour Facility managed the overflow of that line, which comes through after the hours that SWP team managed the calls as well as the weekend. So we do manage the helpline. In addition to that, Senator, as mentioned as well, this Pacific Labour Facility has provided extensive supplementary support during the times of COVID, where we assisted 221 supplementary SWP workers who, as a result of COVID, could not return home. And in particular, I draw your attention to our pregnant workers, where there were 42 SWP pregnant workers that we supported during that time, as obviously borders were closed and they could not return and were within a 12-month waiting period. So extensive assistance from the PLF was provided, including reaching out to hospitals, negotiating with health insurance providers, and ensuring that their visas were compliant with Visa Condition 8501, which is having adequate health insurance in place. So that work provided the SWP, obviously we supported specifically in that period. In addition to that, Senator, obviously the capacity building activities in country, whereas we do have in-country support our labour sending units, where there's a shared responsibility to support those functions. Thank you.
Okay, and do you have a breakdown of what portion of the government funding you receive goes to SWP and what goes to PLS?
Thank you, Senator. I do not have that on me within my capacity.
Senator, I can perhaps just clarify that our contract is very clear in the sense that it does ask the PLF, as Mr Sala has said, to support each of the 10 Pacific countries in a capacity building way to support their role that they play, which includes things like pre-departure briefings, recruitment of workers, which is done by the government rather than the private sector in almost all Pacific countries, because that market doesn't necessarily exist. So they do play that really important in-country role. There is also, as Mr Sala has said, during COVID we did re-engineer some of the responsibilities of PLF to provide extra support where DESI or DFAT needed them to take on that role. So the way the contract is organised actually is not along the lines of SWP, because as we've said in earlier evidence, SWP, the deed was managed by DESI. PLF does not have a role in any of the assurance, compliance relationship with the employers in the seasonal worker program. PLF only comes in Australia when asked to by DESI, and that was very much the case during COVID. During that period, they did need extra help. DESI wasn't able to provide those particular services during the time. So we did amend our contract to change some of the functions within PLF to suit that COVID environment.
Okay, so I may have, maybe I may have an old copy of that contract, but if I can just draw you to what I have down as paragraph 4.1D on page 49, which says the contract will identify and develop partnerships to support national dialogue on managing the risks of worker exploitation and enhancing compliance, as well as support services to workers. The contractor, which is Palladium, will also communicate lessons from research and information from monitoring of the PLS and the SWP. And the contract that has various references to the SWP.
Senator, you're correct. There's very clear direction in the contract around where PLF plays a key role, and as you can see, around all aspects of what happens in the Pacific Labour Scheme, PLF has a key function and a lead. In relate to SWP, that varies. Yes, in relation to research and analysis in the broad, which includes things like evaluation studies, which goes to remittances, how much money's been sent home, reintegration work with each country sending unit, which also is developing policies regularly around the right balance of workers overseas versus those in their own country. They do provide that support. But the primary role in that contract ascribed to SWP is DESI, and that's very much set out in there, set out in that contract under the various annexes to that contract. It's very clear that DESI has that key function.
Okay, thank you. Back to you, Chair.
Good, thanks very much. Yes, Mr.
So,
McDonald, do you
Chair,
want to add
just
something?
for Senator Grogan, that contract number is correct, 74040. So thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Canavan.
Thank you, Chair. I missed some of the evidence earlier, so I apologise if I repeat myself. I just wanted to clarify, after our 2nd of February hearing, did the department or any agency regulator take action to seek to inquire about the allegations made on that date?
Senator Ewan McDonald, Head of the Office of the Pacific. Yes, we certainly did. We took immediate action in relation to the evidence that was provided at the hearing. And as we mentioned earlier, we were also seeking, I suppose, the opportunity to interview some of the people who provided evidence to work through the evidence that was provided. A couple of those took that option up. We have since referred matters on to the Fair Work Ombudsman in the case of 4 individuals. We've also been in constant contact with the employer, including an audit, or I forget the exact term. Is audit the right term, Ms.
An
Heineke?
unannounced visit was undertaken on the 24th of February to the accommodation, given some of the allegations that were raised at the hearing on the 2nd. By unannounced, we mean we only give them 2 hours' notice that we're coming, so that can be investigated at face value. Thanks.
And just adding to that, Senator, the outcome of that was in relation to the accommodation, there were some minor issues that needed to be resolved that have since been resolved. For example, I think access to fans was one of the issues raised here. They were available but not notified to the employee, which we've corrected so that they have access to that. So, yeah, we've investigated them fully. We've referred the pay matters off to the Fair Work Ombudsman, and we're waiting for the outcome of that investigation.
Okay. And in terms of your investigations or questions you've had for the employer or both Madoc and Sunny Ridge in this case, have they been cooperative with your inquiries?
Yes, they have, and Ms Heineke might want to add some detail on that.
Thanks, Senator. We requested the information. The guidelines require, once we request that information, they're required to provide all of the information we request within 5 days, and that was complied with.
Okay. And in terms of ongoing investigations, it sounds like there's simply a referral here to the Fair Work Ombudsman. Is there any further investigations you're doing into these matters?
So we initially, for example, would look at all the pay slips, timesheets, etc. were part of that notice to report request, as well as some of the other issues that were raised in the hearing around accommodation, kitchen access, etc. So the ones that require, particularly when it relates to piece rates and the application of piece rates, it does require the expertise of the Fair Work Ombudsman to have a look at that. So we had an initial look, and then as a result, we did ask Madoc for more information to be provided. That has been provided, and all of that information, as well as any subsequent information that has been provided to us through Madoc directly or through some of the information that's been exchanged through this committee, has been provided to the Fair Work Ombudsman.
And just adding to that, Senator, I think I'm not sure if you heard earlier Ms Heineke talk about there's a couple of cases that we're asking for additional information on since November when they were raised in the press. And the reason for that is as soon as we get that information, we will take immediate action. So we've done that in relation to 4 cases, thanking the committee here for that information. And if we get the information on the other 2, we will take immediate action on those as well.
Okay. And you might have heard earlier there's a contention here about whether or not one of the workers, Tally Pope, worked on 4 days in or around mid-November. Have you looked at that at all, or can you shed any light on whether where the evidence lies here on whether he did in fact work on those days?
Probably similar to the committee, we've recently heard about, I guess, some of the disputes around that. We have referred that information to the Fair Work Ombudsman as well as part of their investigation. I might just also put on the record that we've been in contact with the workers since then, certainly those that have been open to an interview, and we first met with the workers on the 9th of February, including talking to Madoc about where they might move as part of that discussion, and that has involved the Samoa High Commission, and at the request of workers, we did have a mediation on the 3rd of March, which has included Lita, Miss Duggan, who did present today. So there is a move going on at the moment. Some of the workers, 5 of the 6 workers, have taken up an option to move to a site in Queensland, and that's been negotiated by us. I just wanted to put on the record as well that the first that we were advised about the work, we were advised on the 3rd of February. I think it was an earlier question from before. That was the date MADEC advised us that the workers were seeking a move.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And how did MADEC make that request? Was that by writing?
I think it was in a phone call, but I'll have to check that.
Okay.
But we have a record that it happened on the 3rd of February.
Did they simply say the workers had requested this, or did they go into details about when that request was made or how it was made?
Obviously following the hearing, we've had a number of conversations with MADEC around options. It's my understanding that MADEC has been paying the workers since then, while a negotiation has been going on around originally 6, now 5 workers that were seeking a move. There was an original request for those workers to move as a group, but that had to be negotiated with employers, and obviously they also needed to have the work but also have available accommodation that met the standards. So there has been quite a lot of back and forth between MADEC, DFAT and the workers to try and negotiate a suitable site for those workers, noting their preference for many of them to move together. So really important that they move to approved employers. I don't know, including in the earlier evidence that was given today about whether the farm outside Canberra or the Camden farm were improved employers. I think, as we've said before, Senator Canavan, it is important that we move people to improved employers, and that's what's happening in this case of these workers moving to Queensland with their agreement and their consent. Very important part.
Yeah. Okay. I'm specifically just seeking. Was there any indication provided that by MADEC that this request to relocate was as a result of their evidence to the Senate on the 2nd of February, and keeping in mind that in particular, I believe, my recollection is the workers did say that at the Senate hearing. They said they wanted to be relocated. Was that at all indicated as the reason for the question on the 3rd of February?
Yes,
Sorry.
Senator. It was in response to the hearing. We weren't advised beforehand that the workers were seeking a move. I think really it's been first notified as part of the hearing.
I mean, you might not have seen, but I can't remember if it's MADEC or Sunny Ridge had written to us saying that the request had been made on the 31st of January. So you weren't. That is a request from the workers to a Mr. Rob Hay. You weren't made aware of that at all in this particular request that was made on the 3rd of February?
No, Senator.
Okay.
And Senator, I can clarify that information was given to us in a phone call, and we were advised.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
I think I'm just checking for you. That might have been from MADEC, I believe, to us, but that is on our records, I believe, about that conversation that was allegedly held on the 31st of January. Just turning to, are you aware of class action that is proceeding in regards to Pacific Islander workers?
I'm aware of some comments that have been made on that, but Ms Heineke might have more detail.
Senator, yes, we're aware of a proposed class action. I guess it was primarily made aware to us through the media and in an interview with the ABC in November, but there were references to it in a press release made by Levitt Robinson in around about August last year in regard to the Jeff and Jane Smith incident that was discussed by this committee previously.
Do you ever see, when you see those sort of reports, do you seek to contact the law firms directly and ask for any evidence of wrongdoing?
Yes.
So, Senator, just on that, at the time, of course, that program was not sitting with us in Foreign Affairs and Trade. It was in the Seasonal Workers Program, which was DESI at the time. But when we became aware not so much of the class action, but if we go back to the issue that was raised on seasonal workers program, once we're aware we were going to take it over, machinery of government change, we took action, which is where Ms Heineke contacted the lawyers to seek information. So we would.
Have you contacted Miss Dana Levitt, who has provided evidence to us and admitted today that she's somewhat involved in this class action process, or wherever it's at the moment?
Yes.
At the time, we directed it to Mr Levitt through their.
This was before the hearing, was it? When you say
This was on the 13th of December.
Yeah. Okay. And then have you contacted Miss Levitt since the hearing?
Yes, Senator. We've had 5 contact, 5 occasions when we've requested that information now.
Have you had a response from Miss Dana Levitt?
Only in the margins of the. We had a discussion following the hearing on the 2nd, probably in this room, and at that time Miss Levitt did say she would provide the evidence so we could investigate it, and I followed that up 3 times since and haven't been able to get that information by email, but also an attempt to contact the firm, and I was told to email it.
I mean, are you concerned here? I'll be upfront. I'm concerned that some of these law firms, and I would never speak ill of lawyers, but some of these law firms would have an incentive to not seek a regulatory conclusion or fix for the problems emerged here, because they seek to make money if they can continue these issues going through the court system. Is that a concern at all with these types of litigation funders that seem to be involved in this space?
Senator, my comment on that would be we ask all people who are aware of possible issues of concern in relation to the program to raise those with us immediately. We have appropriate procedures in place, as we've shown, I think, since these issues were raised here in this committee, that we will action those immediately. And I think DFAT has a good history of that in relation to the Pacific Labour Scheme, and we will continue that in the future. So anyone who has information, the sooner we can get it, the sooner we can refer it to the appropriate places for investigation. And of course, our concern, Senator, is of course about the individual involved as well, and whether those claims are right. The sooner we can investigate them and look after their welfare, or in fact come to a conclusion that the concerns are not real in either case, the sooner we can do that, the better.
Senator, if I could just add, we did reach out immediately after hearing through the media about this proposed class action to all the High Commissioners and to all our relevant counterparts in each of the 10 countries, just to really encourage them, like we always do, to bring forward any allegations, including any that they were concerned about, particularly that might relate to this proposed class action. We did ask them to bring them to us and really just made sure that they were aware of this. And, you know, as I said before, there's regularly information that comes from country liaison officers and high commissions that conduct activities or are approached by workers in Australia in line with their consular function. So we did try and get that information. We also sought to get it from our files, but it's very difficult without names, payslips and employers.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Just final question. I believe there's a number of reforms occurring right now to potentially better protect workers and support redeployments. I think you might have mentioned a little bit of this at the last hearing. Could you just outline where those reforms are up to and what's happening there?
Senator, so the reforms are scheduled, I think, for April, as per the statements that have been made. They're on target as far as I'm aware, and Ms Heineke can outline what they are. They're things like a 4-year visa, the ability to move more easily between employers, and some others that you may wish to add to.
Sure, Senator. I'll just add a few. We're also looking at one of the reforms that will come in on the 4th of April is being able to move between the seasonal worker the seasonal stream and the long-term stream, particularly linked to skills upgrade, which is really important for Pacific countries. We're also in the process of negotiating with all stakeholders, so Pacific governments, employers, any other community groups. We've also got a PALM advisory group, which will be the name of the new program that merges the seasonal and long stream together. that includes a whole range of stakeholders, including unions, including employers, across all the sectors we work. We don't just work in agriculture. In the Pacific Labour Scheme, we are able to work in all sectors, including the care sector, hospitality, tourism, where there's workforce shortages, to guide those reforms. And once those new deeds are negotiated, then they'll come into effect at the time when everybody agrees to those reforms. We are also, in merging the two programs together, we're looking at best practice in both schemes and making sure that they inform future insurance, compliance and welfare opportunities. And we're working very closely, and this is really important, with each of the high commissions and countries around the cultural approach. It is really important that workers have the right kind of mechanisms to put complaints in, and that they feel comfortable working through a range of avenues to report any complaints or simply to ask questions where they're not sure about deductions. And that is one of the purposes of the 24/7 helpline. Most of the calls we get to that, which is primarily from PLS workers, mostly they are around life in Australia, understanding deductions, understanding pay slips, and might go to preventing issues before they become critical issues.
I think that was a thank you.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. Thank you, though. Thank you. It wasn't
Thank you, Senator.
Thanks, Senator Canavan. I just want to turn to this question. If, and because it's been raised by senators during the day, and whilst you've been here, I just want to raise this question about, do you think it's appropriate that unions or lawyers have a part to play to represent people's interests if there's a problem or a difficulty happening within their workplace?
Yes, Senator. It's a really important part of both the seasonal worker program and PLS guidelines that unions are included, particularly on around the on-site visit that occurs. And we've had a previous discussion, Senator, about I guess some of the issues around practice in that, and it is one of the considerations in the PALM guidelines going forward about notice periods that is under consideration now.
And what's been recommended about notification issues for those listening? It's the issue appear that even remotely or virtually that unions are getting only a couple of hours notice, which tends to be impractical allocation resources, including when people are coming in from overseas, sometimes 24 hours notice to be physically on a particular place in North Queensland, for example. So there is some difficulties going. What's the proposal to rectify that problem?
What I can say is we've taken on board all of your suggestions, and they're drafted at the moment but not yet approved because they're still under negotiation as part of a second draft. There is actually another set of guidelines that will come out in the next couple of days, and they also be shared with unions. Unions are part of the ACTU, for example, sits on the PALM advisory group, who are part of that consultation period. We regularly speak to unions separately and as part of those advisory groups in terms of making sure they've got an input to the PALM guidelines, and regularly speak to them when we need to around particular issues. So I'm not in a position to be able to say exactly what it says in there yet because they're still being approved, but we can say that we've taken on board your advice.
Thank you. I'm just a little bit confused. You just gave an outline, and Mr McDonald gave an outline to Senator Canavan on things that are going to be brought in April, but you're unable to say whether there's issues going to be brought in about people not having access to the Fair Work Ombudsman and their union, which is an integral part of the induction program for Pacific Islanders.
Senator, if I can jump in there, I mean, they do have access to the unions. They do have freedom of association applies in Australia for these workers the same as it does for Australians working here. And they're free to participate or not participate, and that's important from our point of view. So we're on a joint ticket, if you like, in terms of wanting this scheme to work well, and the idea of...
Sorry, Mr McDonald, you may not be aware of the evidence that was given on previous hearings, and that is that the Australian Workers' Union and others have said that they have not been able to go to virtual inductions or physical inductions, obviously virtual during COVID, physical inductions because they've been given such short notice and it's been, or on occasion, no notice. That's the issue I'm dealing with here. Yeah.
What I can say is, at the moment, they're required, as you know, Senator, to be there. What we are looking at as part of the revised guidelines is taking on that advice and putting in a minimum period, which won't be a matter of hours. It will be a much longer period. It's just about settling exactly what that period is, for how much notice they're required to be given to go, which includes, so it's really just amending the time period, which is what will be shifted in the guidelines.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I just want to go this, as you're aware, the Fair Work Ombudsman Harvest Trail completed 836 investigations involving 444 growers and 194 labour hire firms. More than half the investigations found breaches of workplace laws, including underpayment, falsification of records, deliberate withholding of payslips, non-payments and unauthorised deductions. I respect the fact that the department has followed through, and I congratulate you for doing that, followed through on the evidence that was given at the last Senate hearing. I'm also very mindful that both legal representatives, potential legal representatives and unions may be collating information for fear of one person being victimised, or as this investigation is carrying out, victimised in the case potentially when they've appeared before the Senate. That information for people to come forward can be quite gruelling, quite fearful, and having their country people joining them in an action together gives them a feeling of some security because of, frankly, weight of numbers. Now, for those reasons, people don't give information out sometimes. It's not a reflection necessarily on DFAT or the Fair Work Ombudsman. It's a reflection on the fact that this wave, those groups seeing it going forward and making sure there's a voice for everybody, not just that brave few, to speak up. And I raise that brave few question because of what we've seen through the Harvest Trail and, of course, then with the follow-up investigation where there's still considerable misperformance of the employment relationships that would have been detrimental to the workforce. So, again, I appreciate that there's work you do. I appreciate that everyone has a role to play. And I think it's inappropriate to characterise either unions collectively trying to get people a voice rather than having an individual or small groups of individuals victimised or a legal firm is somehow improper. It's just a question of how that should appropriately be dealt with. Have you got anything you want to add to those comments?
So, Senator, from our point of view, and I think we want to be quite inclusive. Our whole objective is to have this program working very well for the employee, but also the employer, but also the Pacific countries. It's very important in our region. So we are encouraging participation across the board on that. My point earlier, Senator, was really the sooner we're aware of the issue, I want to assure people that DFAT will take immediate action, and I think we've shown that in the past. The other bit is on this steering committee or group that oversees it, we've not only got the unions and, of course, the Pacific countries, etc. We've also got community groups, and the reason for that is community groups. A lot of Pacific Islanders and the liaison officer may wish to add to this, talk to others that they're familiar with, they know, they trust. And so we're trying to broaden the scope of who can provide us with that information, because we do want to address that information. The other thing we do, Senator, I think is worth saying, is there are surveys and there are outreach done to individuals. So, for example, the World Bank does regular surveys, and the overwhelming majority of that feedback, and we can provide that to you, is that seasonal workers are very satisfied and want to come back and work in Australia again, often with the same employer. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't be gathering all the information and reforming the program. The final thing I'd say is the seasonal workers program we've just taken over, as you know, and we will be looking at how we can bring those together with best practice from both programs.
Thank you, Mr McDonald. First of all, I very much support the program. I think it's a very important initiative with our neighbours in the Pacific. But it does sort of not quite, what you're saying is, you are telling me the truth, but what you're presenting is that there is some obvious answer to this ongoing problem of 836 investigations involving 444 growers and 194 labour hire firms. More than half of the investigations found breaches of workplace laws. So my point I'm making is there's a lot of work to be done about how we make sure that this is done in a fit and proper way. And due respect to the World Bank, I'll rely on the Fair Work Ombudsman's actual investigation to find out whether Australian standards are being applied to workers, workers that are working within this country on temporary visas or visas generally.
Yeah, and I mean, we can only, I suppose the only thing I'd add to that, that's the importance of some of the audits and checks we're doing unannounced and the like, to go and have a look at exactly what you're talking about to make sure that those breaches aren't occurring.
Yeah, and again, I'm not discounting the resources that are allocated from various parties. We've mentioned departments and previous departments, and to date, resources are limited. The question is that, which is again an issue that was raised consistently through this hearing by other senators, and that is that, in my view, trying to delegitimise that people have a right to go to a union, or delegitimise the fact that people have a right to go to a legal firm, or delegitimising that people have a right to go, which they weren't suggesting, to a government department. And I think all those players have a role to play, an important role to play.
We agree, Senator, and that's why they're a really important part of what we do, and we're really happy to provide you table today the members who are on the various committees we have, including some that look after each of the... We've got one committee, the PALM committee, that looks after all of it, but we've also got committees that look in more depth at each sector, the agriculture, the care sectors, for example, and Meatworks, which are the three big sectors that we work in. If I might just add, the Harvest Trail report obviously looked at all visa holders and Australians that work in the sector. I think much of the evidence, and certainly what we get from many of the peaks that we work with in the agriculture sector, is one of the objectives of the PALM program going forward, and it's grown significantly from, most pre-COVID was 8,000 at any one point in time in Australia, to now we, by April, will have about 25,000 in Australia, mostly in the agriculture sector. It is because it's a regulated program. I think the evidence that's come forward from many experts in this sector, Joanna House, for example, I know the ACTU has commented on this as well, is that the reason that we're able to rectify and know about issues in this is because it's a regulated program. A lot of the allegations that are coming forward don't have the same level of regulations, and so the fact that we've now got a lot more workers coming in under a regulated program in that sector is an important part of the reform in those sectors, which obviously is being led more broadly from the Department of Agriculture, but this is an important part.
Thank you.
Can I also...
Yeah, absolutely, Mr. Salo, if you want to add something to that.
From a PLS perspective, or the Pacific Labour Facility is our community of care model, and this is the approach that we adopted in April last year. And it recognises the collective obligations of all labour mobility stakeholders, including workers themselves, in assuming and creating, maintaining and responding to welfare and wellbeing needs. It's informed by our best practices, which shows that an over-reliance on a single welfare provider, isolation of workers, lack of pro-social connections, and a disjointed delivery of support can have an adverse effect on vulnerable cohorts. So our community of care, and I understand will adopt moving forward in the PALM scheme, recognises the responsibility of all stakeholders in the upholding of or supporting the workers in Australia. Supplementary to the community of care, and you have mentioned the escalation process, we have developed, a escalation and response table which clearly outlines to our stakeholders when to escalate matters, and we use our regional accelerator forums all around the country to educate our stakeholders in terms of what's low risk, what's medium risk, and what's high risk that needs to be escalated through to us.
Thank you, Mr. Salo. I just want a final question. That there was, I think this has been give him, yep. Oh, sorry. There's an article which it's entitled Samoan Farm Workers Told to Quit White People's Unions by a journalist by the name of Ben Snyders, February the 28th, 2022.
Sorry, Senator. Which one? Senator?
Yeah, that's it. Just in that article, it goes to the question of where workers have been told that there's been allegations against an individual within the program. And I say the program because it appears to be on the surface either the old PLS SWP or now the PALM appears on the surface. In those allegations that were made and in the Sydney Morning Herald and reprinted in The Age and numerous other places subsequently, it states that the Samoan farm workers in Australia were pressured to quit a union by a senior Samoan who warned them to defy him because the order came from their government at home. Has there been an investigation into that question? And the reason I'm asking that is for two reasons. The second part of the question is, was the firm that was involved with this practice supposed to have occurred? If you've investigated it, was it an operation that included Matic?
Well, Senator, I haven't seen the article previously, but you may have.
So in relation to, actually, I think some letters that were sent from the UWU to the Samoan government, which were copied to us, we have had dialogue with the Samoan High Commissioner, and our High Commissioner has also spoken in Samoa to the government there. The Samoan government has sought information on our laws. We've provided them. They are aware of the deed, which does require deed of association, and I've spoken to the UWU a few times, and UWU is waiting for a meeting with the relevant minister in Samoa, which is actually the acting Prime Minister at the moment of Samoa, is that minister, the relevant Labor minister. So they're working through their local partner to resolve the issue with Samoa, and I don't really want to speak on the government of Samoa's behalf, but I can assure you that it is something that they're focused on.
Thank you. Are you aware whether the company Matic was? The reason I'm asking this question is because we are dealing with questions
Senator.
of whether there's been victimisation as a result of people giving evidence to the Senate. I'm trying to get a feel for, are there other potential areas of risk?
My understanding is, and certainly in discussions with Samoan government and the union, Matic has not been mentioned. I think as evidence from before, Matic has a regular meeting with the UWU, and I don't know whether that's come up between them. That would be something you'd need to direct towards them.
Can you take it on notice, because Matic's part of the program, so if you can take it on notice about whether you're looking at this matter.
Well, Senator, I guess what we're doing is we're liaising with the Samoan government around the particular issues that they're now taking up with the UWU. We've provided them with information on Australian laws. We're not investigating the Samoan government employee for what they've said.
Sorry, I may not have been clear. But all I'm asking for is Matic, which is the labour hire firm, whether Matic was involved in this particular group of workers.
Yeah,
we can take that on notice.
Yeah, and we'll have a look at it.
Not asking another question.
Yeah.
Mr. Sulla, can you enlighten us at all? Palladium has a big responsibility here for Pacific Islanders, and I might add, seems like a lot of money, so I want to know how it's being spent. Have you made any representations regards to this article?
Thank you, Senator, for the opportunity. From the outset, it is not the Pacific Labour Facility's responsibility. The country liaison officers are independent from us, obviously reporting to the Samoan government. I can provide some examples as to how, more broadly, we are building capacity, not only in country but also here in Australia with our liaison officers. And that includes, we have monthly forums of our liaison officers, our country liaison officers since the April 2020, we've held over 30, so it initially started weekly, then fortnightly. And in these sessions, Senator, we introduce complex, topics such as health insurance. Fair Work is included as well, so I can confirm that our liaison officers were invited in August and October last year to the Fair Work Ombudsman sessions, which included clarifying horticultural awards, compliance with legislation frameworks, Fair Work's role in Pacific labour mobility. I have also invited them on the 14th of April to the new, to another session which includes clarification around piecework arrangements for the horticultural.
Mr. Salah, sorry, I'm just very mindful of the time.
Yeah, sure.
And I would be very happy if you wanted to put that in writing to the committee because it's of the broader issues. I appreciate the evidence you've given so far. I've just got time for one more question. But if you're invited to certainly make a submission to questions on notice on that in writing would be more than welcome.
No problem.
Just one question. Ms. Henke, you mentioned that there was a major issue that's been actioned this week without necessarily divulging all the details of who the people are involved, unless you see fit to do that. But what's the actual action that's involved this week, this major action?
So what I was trying to demonstrate is that through our regular compliance assurance activities, that if there are issues that are being brought forward, and in this case it was taken forward it was alleged by workers, we investigate it. So what we will do as a result is we've now issued a notice to report on that particular employer around the allegations that were raised by workers, and that's under active investigation. What the next steps are is too early to make a judgment on, but that's the sort of thing that does come up as part of those compliance activities, and in most cases they're minor, but in some cases they will mean referrals to the Fair Work Ombudsman, and the types of remedies that they have at their disposal can be applied, of course.
I appreciate I'm not asking you the details and the names of the people, just that what has brought you to the conclusion that it's a potential major action?
Well, when we say major...
And I'm asking what are the issues that are...
Yeah, they're really around paying conditions and application of piece rates that have been brought to our attention.
I think it's important in the process to be clear that the intention to report is obviously to enable the employer to put their views on those before we take action.
Yeah, I wasn't asking any more detail than what the first step was. Good, thank you very much for your time. I really very much appreciate you all coming and joining us today. If you've taken any questions on notice, please provide responses to the Secretariat by midday, Friday the 17th of March 2022. I'd like to thank you very much. I'll now close, but I'd like to thank the witnesses who have given evidence to the committee today. I now declare this final public hearing of the Senate Select Committee on Job Security adjourned. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Chair.
So should have thanked.